She couldn't give him children, so he gave her a family instead. What happens when a broken waitress, told her whole life she's worth less because her body betrayed her, gets pulled into the world of a man who owns half of New York's shadows and decides she's the only thing he's ever wanted to keep? Tessa Hale thought her secret made her unlovable. Adrian Voss heard it and didn't blink. Before you dive in, hit that like button and drop the city you're watching from in the comments so I can see how far this story travels tonight. Stay till the end. You don't want to miss how it ends. The rain in Hell's Kitchen didn't fall so much as it leaked. Slow, greasy. The kind that smelled like fryer oil and wet asphalt and something older underneath. Something the city never really washed out. Tessa Hale pulled her jacket tighter around her ribs and told herself she'd been colder before. It wasn't true, but telling yourself things was how you got through a double shift at Mickey's Diner on a Tuesday in March, when your manager shorted your tips again and the wind off the Hudson cut through denim like it had a grudge. She was 26 years old. She had $43 in her checking account, a rent payment due in 9 days, and a pair of sneakers with a hole in the left heel that she'd been patching with electrical tape for 2 months. The tape wasn't holding anymore. She could feel the water now, working its way up into her sock, and she thought distantly the way you think about things when you're too tired to actually feel them. So that's going to be a problem. Hey, sweetheart. She didn't turn. You didn't turn. That was rule 1 in this city, the thing her mother had taught her back when her mother was still the kind of woman who taught things instead of the kind who forgot her daughter's name on bad days. You kept your head down and your pace steady, and you did not, under any circumstances, make eye contact with the voice behind you. I'm talking to you. 2 sets of footsteps now. Maybe 3. The alley she'd cut through to save 6 minutes, because 6 minutes mattered when the next bus came at 10:48, and missing it meant waiting until 11:22 in the cold. The alley narrowed ahead of her, opened onto 10th Avenue, and she could see the streetlight at the end of it like the mouth of a tunnel. 40 feet. Maybe less. She walked faster. Oh, come on, don't be like that. A hand closed around her upper arm. It wasn't hard, at first. That was almost worse. It was casual, the way a man grabs a woman he already thinks belongs to him, and Tessa felt something drop inside her chest. Not fear exactly, not yet, but the recognition that fear was coming, that fear had her address and was on its way up the stairs. She turned. There were 3 of them, college age maybe, or pretending to be, in jackets that cost more than her rent, and the flushed, stupid faces of men who'd been drinking since happy hour and were now at the point in the night where the alcohol had stopped being fun and started being something else. The one holding her arm was the tallest. His friend behind him was laughing at nothing. The third one wasn't laughing, and that was the one she should have watched, she realized later. That was the one whose eyes were already doing the math. Let go of me, Tessa said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. That was something, at least. We're just saying hi. Let go. Jesus, relax. You walk through an alley like that at night, what do you think's going to happen? She yanked her arm. He tightened his grip. There it was. Not casual anymore. Her shoulder wrenched and she stumbled half a step toward him, and she could smell the whiskey on him. Expensive whiskey. The kind that didn't smell bad but smelled like money, and she thought very clearly, I am going to get hurt tonight. I am going to get hurt and nobody is going to come. Hey, let's take her somewhere. That was the quiet one. The one doing math. Come on, man. I said let's take her somewhere. The tall one looked at her. Really looked for the first time, and whatever he saw, the tired under her eyes, the cheap mascara, the apron she hadn't fully tucked into her bag, it made his smile widen in a way that turned her stomach into a closed fist. Yeah, he said. Yeah, okay. She opened her mouth to scream and he clamped a hand over it, and that was when the 4th man stepped into the alley. He didn't hurry. That was the first thing she registered, later, when she was trying to put the night back together in her head. He didn't run, didn't shout, didn't do any of the things you'd expect a man to do when he walked into a scene like that. He just turned the corner from 10th Avenue and started walking toward them, unhurried, hands in the pockets of a charcoal overcoat that looked like it had been cut by someone who knew his measurements to the millimeter. Gentlemen, 1 word. Low, almost polite. The tall one's grip loosened maybe half an inch, enough for Tessa to turn her head, enough for her to see him, the stranger, whoever he was, passing under the alley's one working bulb, and the light caught his face for just a second, and she thought stupidly, he doesn't look scared. He should look scared. Walk away, the man in the overcoat said. Mind your business. This is my business. The quiet one, the one doing math, took a step back. He'd seen something the others hadn't. Tessa saw it in the way his weight shifted, the way his eyes dropped to the man's hands, and then to his shoes, and then to his face, and then away, fast, like a kid who'd accidentally made eye contact with a dog he'd been warned about. Marcus, the quiet one said. Marcus, hey, let's go. Shut up. Marcus. The tall one, Marcus, finally heard something in his friend's voice. His head swiveled, and the man in the overcoat was close now, close enough that Tessa could see his eyes, and his eyes were the calmest thing she had ever seen in her life. Not cold, not angry, just empty of the things that make a man hesitate. Take your hand off her, the man said. I'll say it once. Marcus said something. Tessa didn't hear what, because her mouth was still covered and her pulse was in her ears, and the next thing she knew, Marcus's hand was no longer on her. It was being held, bent backward at an angle hands weren't supposed to bend. And Marcus was making a sound that wasn't quite a scream because he didn't have the air for one. It took maybe 4 seconds. Maybe less. Tessa would try later to remember the order of things. The way the stranger moved, the way Marcus went down, the way the second one swung and hit nothing but wall because the stranger wasn't where he'd been a half second earlier. And she couldn't. It was too fast and too quiet. There was no yelling. There was one short, flat crack that might have been a nose, and one longer sound that was definitely a knee. And then it was over, and the 3 men were on the ground or running, and the stranger was adjusting the cuff of his coat like he'd just reached across a table for the salt. He looked at her. Are you hurt? She couldn't answer. Her mouth was working, but nothing was coming out. She looked down at her own hands, and they were shaking so hard she thought for a second they weren't hers. Miss, look at me. Are you hurt? No, I don't think so. I don't. Good. He took off his coat. Just took it off, in the middle of a Hell's Kitchen alley at 10:40 at night, and held it out to her. And when she didn't move, he stepped forward and draped it over her shoulders himself. It weighed more than her own jacket. Cashmere, she thought dumbly. She'd served cashmere at the diner. Businessmen, mostly, the kind who left 4% tips. What's your name? Tessa. Tessa what? Hale. Tessa Hale. My name is Adrian Voss. Can you walk? Yeah. Yes. Then we're going to walk to the end of this alley, and there will be a car, and you're going to get in it, and I'm going to take you home. Is that all right? I don't know you. No, he said. You don't. He said it like it was a fact she'd asked him to confirm, not a reason for her to refuse. He didn't try to convince her. He just stood there, 2 steps away, the streetlight at the alley's mouth behind him, turning him into a silhouette, and he waited. Marcus groaned from the ground. The other 2 were gone. Tessa started walking. The car was black. Of course it was. It was the kind of black that swallowed the light from the street lamp and gave none of it back. And there was a man behind the wheel she hadn't seen before. And when Adrian opened the rear door, she hesitated one last time on the curb, and he waited, again, without a word. Why? She said. He looked at her. Why what? Why did you? Because 3 men were about to hurt you, and I was in a position to stop it. That's not. She laughed, which was strange because nothing was funny. That's not how people are. No, Adrian Voss said. It isn't. And he gestured, patient, to the open door. She got in. The leather was warm. She hadn't expected that. It was the first warm thing she'd felt all night, and she almost made a sound when her legs met it, almost leaned her head back and closed her eyes. And then she remembered she was in a strange man's car in a strange part of the city, and she sat up straight. What's your address? What? Your address, Miss Hale. You don't have to. I can take the bus. He looked at her. Just looked. And she felt something slide sideways in her chest, because there was no impatience in his face, no condescension, just the quiet weight of a man who had already decided what was going to happen and was politely giving her the chance to catch up. 182 West 47th, she said. Apartment 6. It's a walk-up. Thank you. He said something in a low voice to the driver. The car pulled away from the curb without a sound. Tessa pressed her forehead against the cold glass of the window and watched 10th Avenue go by and thought, this is how women disappear. This is exactly how it happens. You get into the warm car, but she didn't move to the door. She didn't try the handle. She sat with Adrian Voss's coat around her shoulders, and she watched the lights of Midtown smear past, and she realized, slowly, that her hands had stopped shaking. She didn't know what that meant. You work at the diner. She jumped. She hadn't meant to. He'd spoken so quietly she'd almost missed it, but his voice in the enclosed space of the car made her flinch, and he noticed, and his mouth did something that wasn't quite an apology. How do you know that? Your apron, the logo, Mickey's, on 9th. Oh. How long? 3 years? Almost 4? And before? She looked at him properly for the first time. Under the sodium lights of the BQE, they'd turned, she realized. They were going the wrong way for her apartment, or maybe the right way. She didn't actually know this part of the city. Under the orange light, his face was all plains, older than she'd thought in the alley. Late 30s, early 40s maybe. Dark hair going a little gray at the temples. A small scar through one eyebrow, old and pale, the kind you forget is there. Before what? Before the diner. Why do you want to know? Because I'd like to know who I just pulled out of an alley. She almost laughed again. You want my resume? If you'd like to give it. I waitressed. I waitressed before the diner too, and before that I worked in a laundromat in Jersey City, and before that She stopped. She didn't know why she was telling him any of this. She didn't know why she'd gotten in the car. She didn't know anything tonight, except that she was warm, and a man who looked like he could kill her with a dinner fork was asking her questions in the tone of voice people used at dinner parties. Before that, he said. Before that, I was in a foster home in Yonkers. What is this? A conversation? It feels like a job interview. It isn't. Then what is it? He was quiet for a long moment. The driver, silent, unmoving, took the exit for the Upper West Side, and Tessa thought vaguely, that's not my neighborhood. She thought about saying something. She didn't. I wanted to know if someone was going to look for you tonight, Adrian said finally. What? If someone would be worried, if you didn't come home. No, there isn't anyone. He nodded. Once, like she'd confirmed something he'd already suspected. Turn here, he said to the driver. And to her, without looking, Miss Hale, you have 2 options. I can take you home, in which case those men, or men like them, or men sent by the men who sent them, will likely come looking for you before the week is out. Or you can come with me, for tonight, to somewhere safe, and in the morning we can talk about what happens next. She stared at him. What are you talking about? Men sent, what are you? I'll explain, but not in the car. No, take me home. Now. He looked at her. The car was already slowing. She could see the driver's eyes in the rearview mirror watching his boss, waiting. Home, Tessa said. Please. Adrian nodded. He said a single word to the driver. The car turned. And Tessa Hale sat in the back of a stranger's Mercedes, with her hands curled into fists in her lap, and she told herself she'd made the right choice, and she almost believed it. He walked her up. She hadn't wanted him to. She'd said, standing on the curb outside her building, I'm fine from here, thank you. And he'd looked up at the walk-up and said very quietly, Miss Hale, the lock on your front door is broken. And she'd turned and looked at it, because of course it was. It had been for 6 weeks. The super was an 80-year-old Russian who hadn't fixed anything since 2019. And when she'd turned back, he was already out of the car. 6 flights. He didn't say a word the whole way up. He walked a half step behind her, which she realized, somewhere around the 3rd floor, wasn't accidental. He was keeping himself between her and whatever was behind them. She couldn't decide if that was sweet or terrifying. At her door, she fumbled the key, dropped it. He didn't move to pick it up. He waited, and she bent. And when she stood back up with the key in her hand, she met his eyes, and he was looking at her with an expression she couldn't read at all. You're safe tonight, he said. They won't move this fast, but tomorrow? I don't even know what this is. I know. Then, may I come in for a moment? She stared at him. No. All right. I'm sorry, I don't. You don't have to apologize, Miss Hale. She opened the door, closed it, locked it, for whatever that was worth with the broken front door downstairs. And she stood in the dark of her studio apartment, 400 square feet, a single bed, a hot plate, a bathroom with a shower that only gave hot water on Tuesdays. And she listened to his footsteps go back down the stairs, slow, unhurried, and she thought, that's it, that's over. That didn't happen. I didn't just... But she was still wearing his coat. She looked down. The cashmere was dark in the dim light from the window, and she ran her fingers over the collar, and she thought about how it had smelled when he draped it over her shoulders, clean, expensive, with something under it that was just a man, just skin and warmth, and her throat closed. She sat down on the floor, she put her head on her knees. She didn't cry exactly, she wasn't a crier. She'd stopped being one a long time ago, back in the Yonkers foster home. Back when Mrs. Dellinger had told her that tears were what girls used when they wanted something, and that Tessa had better figure out how to want things without crying for them. She'd listened. It had mostly worked. But she sat there, on the warped linoleum of her kitchen floor, wrapped in a stranger's coat, and her shoulders shook for a while. When she finally looked up, she realized there was a piece of paper in the inside pocket. She'd felt it, vaguely, on the drive over. She pulled it out now. It was a business card. Heavy stock, cream-colored, no logo, just a name, in a clean serif font, A. Vosses. And below it, in smaller letters, a single phone number. Nothing else. She turned it over. The back was blank. She stared at it for a long time. Then she set it on her counter, next to the hot plate, and she stood up and she went to bed still wearing the coat, because she couldn't, for some reason she couldn't bring herself to take it off. She slept harder than she had in months. She woke up at 6. The habit was too old to break. She lay in bed for a long moment and stared at her ceiling. Water stains shaped like Florida she'd been meaning to tell the super for a year, and she thought maybe it had all been a dream. Then she looked at her chair and saw the coat draped over it. Oh, she said out loud, to her empty apartment. Oh no, she made coffee. She burnt the toast because she always burnt the toast. The toaster had a bad coil. She ate standing up at the counter, and she looked at the business card and she thought about throwing it away. She thought about it for about 20 minutes, then she put it in the zip pocket of her purse, and she told herself she'd throw it away later, and she walked to the diner. Which was the mistake. She knew it was a mistake the moment she turned the corner onto 9th. She couldn't have said how. It was the same block it had always been. The Korean grocery, the old dry cleaner with the cat that slept in the window, Mickey's sign still missing its second K, and it was still early enough that the sidewalk was mostly empty. But something was wrong. Something in the shape of the morning. A man was leaning against the mailbox across the street from the diner. He was reading a newspaper. Nobody read newspapers anymore. Tessa walked past him without turning her head. She went into the diner. She hung up her jacket. She tied on her apron and she walked to the counter and she said good morning to Marta, and Marta said good morning back, and Tessa poured coffee for her first table with hands that looked, to anyone who didn't know her, perfectly steady. Then she went into the back and she stood in the walk-in freezer for 3 minutes with her forehead against a box of frozen hash browns, and she tried to breathe. They won't move this fast. He'd said that. Adrian Voss had said that last night. And she'd thought he was being dramatic, or maybe trying to scare her into his car, and now there was a man across the street with a newspaper. And she couldn't tell if he was watching her or if she was losing her mind. Tessa, table 4 wants more cream. Coming. She worked the breakfast rush on autopilot. She smiled at the right times and wrote the right orders down, and she only dropped 1 plate, which was average for her. And every time the bell above the door jingled, she looked up. And every time she looked up, she expected to see him. The quiet one. The one doing math, the one from the alley. And every time it was just another customer, and she felt her shoulders drop a 1/4 inch in relief before the next bell rang. At 10:15, a man in a dark suit sat down at table 7. Not Adrian. Older. Gray hair, close cropped. The kind of face you didn't remember 5 minutes after you'd seen it. Which was, Tessa realized later, exactly the point. He ordered coffee and a short stack. He thanked her politely. And when she set down his plate, he slid a folded piece of paper across the formica toward her without looking up from his newspaper, and he said in the same conversational tone he'd used to order his pancakes, "Miss Hale, you're in danger. Please read this." She froze. "Pretend I asked for more butter," he said. "Smile. Walk away." She smiled. She walked away. She was not entirely in control of her body. She went behind the counter and she set down the paper on the shelf below the register, and she unfolded it with her back turned so Marta wouldn't see. The handwriting was the same as the card. "Miss Hale, the man outside is not mine. There are 2 others I haven't identified. Please do not go home. A car will be waiting at the back exit at 10:45. My associate, Mr. Keller, is the gentleman at table 7. He will walk you out when you are ready. I apologize for the intrusion. I had hoped to be wrong." A V. She read it twice. She folded it. She put it in her apron pocket, and she looked up and met Mr. Keller's eyes across the diner, and he gave her the smallest possible nod. And she understood, with a clarity that surprised her, that she was not going to make it through this day pretending her life was still her own. She untied her apron at 10:42. "Marta, I have to go. I'm sorry." "What?" "I have to go. Family thing. I'm sorry. I'll explain." "Tessa, you can't just—" I know. I'm sorry." She didn't take her jacket. She didn't go out the front. Mr. Keller stood up, set a $50 bill on his table without waiting for change, and walked to the back of the diner as if he'd worked there for years. He held the kitchen door for her. The cook stared. Nobody said anything. The back alley smelled like grease and garbage, and the rain from last night still sitting in the potholes. A black SUV was idling at the curb. The rear door was open. Tessa looked at Mr. Keller, and Mr. Keller looked at her, and he said very gently, "After you, Miss Hale." She got in. The driver was different. The SUV was different. But the silence was the same, and the leather was the same, and the dark tint on the windows was the same. And Tessa sat with her hands in her lap and watched Manhattan go by, and she felt, for the first time, something that wasn't quite fear. It was adjacent to fear. It was the thing that came after fear when you realized that the thing you were afraid of had already happened, and was still happening, and would continue to happen, whether you wanted it to or not. She thought the word trapped. It didn't feel right. She tried caught. That was closer. Mr. Keller was in the front passenger seat. He didn't speak. They drove uptown, then east, then north again, and then they were on a road she didn't know, going through a gate she didn't see open, and the SUV rolled to a stop on a circle of white gravel in front of a house that made her mouth go dry. It wasn't a house. It was the idea of a house, done in stone and glass, set into a slope of trees she hadn't realized still existed this close to the city. Adrian Voss was standing on the steps. He was in a different suit, navy, this time, no tie, and he watched the SUV pull up with his hands in his pockets and an expression she couldn't read. Mr. Keller opened her door. She got out. "Miss Hale." "Don't—" Her voice cracked. She tried again. "Don't Miss Hale me. You told me I had until tomorrow. I was wrong." "You were wrong." "Yes." She laughed. It wasn't a good sound. "You were wrong. Okay, that's... Okay, who was the man across the street? Who was watching me? What is this? What is this? Come inside." No. He didn't argue. He waited. The gravel crunched under Mr. Keller's shoes somewhere behind her, and the wind moved through the trees, and Tessa Hale stood on a rich man's driveway in her apron. She'd forgotten to take off the apron, she realized. She was still wearing the apron, and she thought about running. She actually thought about it. She looked at the gate, far down the drive, and she thought about the distance and the fact that she didn't have her phone charged, and the fact that even if she made it to the road, she didn't know what road it was, and she understood that running was not an option that currently existed for her. Tessa. It was the first time he'd used her first name. "Come inside, please. I'll tell you everything. You can leave if you want to." "Can I?" He looked at her, and for one long second she thought he was going to lie. "No," he said. "Probably not. I'm sorry." She almost laughed again. She didn't. She looked at him, at his steady face, his steady hands, the dark scar through his eyebrow. And she thought about the alley, and the way her hands had stopped shaking in his car, and the weight of his coat on her shoulders. She thought about the fact that he'd told her the truth just now when a lie would have been easier. She walked past him up the steps. The inside of the house was, she didn't have the words. She didn't know the words. She'd never been in a house with a ceiling this high, or floors this clean, or art on the walls that looked like it belonged in a museum, and probably had. A woman in a gray blouse, not a maid exactly, something more than that, took Adrian's nod and disappeared down a hallway without saying anything. He led her into a room off the main hall. Library, maybe. Books floor to ceiling, leather chairs, a fire that was already going even though it was mid-morning. He gestured to a chair. She didn't sit. "Who are you?" she said. "My name is Adrian Voss." That's not what I asked." "I know." He went to a small table by the window, poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal decanter, brought her one. She took it because her mouth was dry. She didn't drink it. "I own a private security and logistics firm," he said. "Officially. Unofficially, I handle certain arrangements between families in this city and elsewhere. My name is known in certain rooms. My presence in those rooms keeps other things from happening." "Families." "Yes." "Like families." "Yes, Miss Hale. Like that." She sat down. Her knees decided for her. She put the water on the little table beside the chair, and she stared at the fire and she said, "Why me?" "I'm sorry? Why are you doing this? Why did you—" "Last night in the alley, you didn't know me. You don't know me. Why did you stop?" "I was nearby." "That's not an answer?" He was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said. "It isn't." "Then answer it." "I saw you through the window of the car. Before I got out. He stopped. She had the strangest sense, watching him, that Adrian Voss did not often have to explain himself to anyone and was not sure how it was done. "I recognized you." "From where?" "The diner. I've eaten there, twice." "You?" "Once about 3 months ago. Once in November. You served me both times. You didn't notice me either time. I'm not the kind of man people notice, when I don't want to be." She stared at him. "You've been—" "No, I have not been watching you. I ate breakfast at a diner twice, and my server was kind to me once, when I was having a difficult morning. And when I saw her tonight in an alley with 3 men, I stopped the car. That is the whole of it. I'm telling you this because you asked, and I will not lie to you." "I was kind to you." "Yes." "How?" He looked at the fire. "I came in at 4 in the morning. November. It had been a bad night. You were the only one working. You asked me if I wanted coffee, and I said yes, and you brought it, and then you brought a second cup without asking, about 15 minutes later, and you didn't try to make conversation. You knew I didn't want any, and you left me alone. I sat in that booth for 2 hours. You didn't charge me for the second cup. Tessa didn't remember. She didn't remember him at all. She'd worked 10,000 4 a.m. shifts in her life, and they all ran together, and she didn't remember a man in a dark coat sitting in the corner booth at 4 in the morning. And the fact that he remembered her, the fact that he'd remembered her well enough to recognize her through a car window in an alley, made something in her chest go very still. "And the men," she said, "last night. A complication. They saw me with you. They took a photograph, I'm told, as you got out of my car at your apartment. It will have been distributed by now." "Distributed to who?" "To the people who have reason to be interested in anyone I take an interest in." "You didn't take—" "They don't know that." She understood. She didn't want to understand, but she did. She closed her eyes. "So I'm— what? I'm a target? Because I got into your car?" "Yes." "Because you stopped and helped me?" "Yes." "I should go to the police." "You can." "Will that work?" He didn't answer. She opened her eyes, looked at him. He was standing by the window with his hands in his pockets and the morning light on one side of his face, and she thought, with a clarity that surprised her, "This man is not going to lie to me. He's done a lot of things, but he's not going to lie to me about this." "What do you want from me?" she said. "Nothing." "Everybody wants something. Not from you, not right now. Right now I want you to be somewhere you can't be hurt. That's all. And then we'll talk about what happens next." She laughed. It was a small, tired sound. "You keep saying that." "I keep meaning it." She stood up. She walked to the window. The grounds outside went on for, she didn't know, acres. A long lawn, bare trees, a low stone wall in the distance, and nothing but more trees beyond it. She couldn't see the gate from here. She couldn't see the road. She was somewhere north of the city, and she had no phone and no wallet and no shoes that weren't waitressing sneakers, and she thought about all the women who had disappeared into houses like this, and she thought about the fact that she was still, somehow, not afraid. That was the thing she couldn't figure out. She should have been afraid. "Mr. Voss." "Adrian." "Mr. Voss." She didn't turn around. "There's something you should know." "All right. Before you, whatever this is, whatever you think I'm, whatever. There's something. Tell me." She swallowed. She hadn't said this out loud in, she didn't know, years. Since the last boyfriend, the one who'd looked at her like she was a broken thing when she'd told him, and had left, without yelling, within a week. She hadn't told anyone since. There hadn't been anyone to tell. She didn't know why she was telling him. "I can't have children." The room was very quiet. When I was 19, I had endometriosis. It was bad. They didn't catch it for a long time. By the time they did, I had surgery, twice. The second one, She stopped. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't, so she put them flat against the cold glass of the window. "I can't. That's all. Whatever you think this is, whatever you think I am, I'm not. I can't give anyone that. And I know men. I know what, Miss Hale. I'm telling you because I don't want you to—" "Tessa." She turned. He hadn't moved from the window. His hands were still in his pockets. His face was exactly the same as it had been. "I heard you," he said. I heard you. It doesn't change anything." "You don't—" "It doesn't change anything. Do you understand me?" "No." "Good," he said very quietly. "Neither do I. But it still doesn't." She stared at him, and somewhere, under her ribs, something she had been carrying for 7 years without knowing she was carrying it, shifted half an inch, just half an inch, and settled somewhere new. She sat back down in the chair. She put her face in her hands. She didn't cry. She still wasn't a crier, but she sat there for a long time with her face in her hands and her breath coming slow and uneven, and Adrian Voss stood at the window and didn't say a word, and didn't move toward her, and didn't try to comfort her. And somehow that was the thing. Somehow that was the thing that undid her more than anything else had in a long, long time. Outside, the wind moved through the bare trees. Somewhere deeper in the house, a door opened and closed, and Tessa Hale, who'd had $43 and a hole in her shoe 12 hours ago, sat in a stranger's library and understood, without being able to say why, that her life had just become something else, that the woman who'd walked into that alley last night was not the woman who was going to walk out of this house, and that whatever came next, she was not going to walk it alone. She lifted her head. "Okay," she said. Adrian Voss turned from the window. "Okay, what?" "Okay. Tell me the rest." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he walked to the chair across from hers, and he sat down, and he leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. The first time she'd seen him do anything that looked unguarded, and he began, quietly, to talk. He started with the names. He didn't ask her if she wanted to hear them. He just said them, the way a doctor says the name of a disease, flat, careful, without any of the decoration people used when they were trying to soften a thing. The Marchetti family, out of Brooklyn. The Okonkwo operation, out of the Bronx. A Serbian group he didn't bother naming because, he said, their name changed every 18 months and the name wasn't the point. The point was the shape of them. The way they sat around the city like pieces on a board that had been set up for a game nobody had started and nobody was allowed to end. "And you," Tessa said, "are one of them." "No." "Then what are you?" "The man they call when the pieces need to be moved without a war." She stared at him. She didn't know what to do with that. She'd grown up on the same movies everyone else had grown up on. The grim men in dark restaurants, the wives who didn't ask questions, the bodies in the trunks. And nothing Adrian Voss had said or done so far had fit into any of those movies. And she didn't know if that was because he was telling her the truth, or because the truth was more complicated than the movies had room for. You're a fixer. That's one word for it. Is there a better one? Not really, he said, but I don't particularly like that one. Why? Because it makes it sound like I clean things up. I don't. I keep things from getting dirty in the first place. When I can. When I can't. He shrugged, barely. Then I clean things up. He stood and went to the decanter. He didn't pour water this time. He poured something amber into a short glass, and he didn't offer her any, and he didn't drink it either. He set it on the small table between them, and he looked at it the way a man looks at a dog he's decided not to feed. The photograph, she said. Of me. At my apartment. Yes. Who has it? By now, probably 6 people. By tonight, probably a dozen. And they think I made an unusual decision. I don't make unusual decisions. So the assumption in every room that matters will be that you are either something I have chosen or something I have been ordered to protect. Neither of those things comes without a price tag. For you. For you. She heard it, and she understood it, and she still didn't quite feel it. It was like being told the building you were sitting in was on fire on a floor you couldn't see yet. The information was there. The smoke wasn't. I don't know anything, she said. I serve pancakes. I don't know anyone. I don't have anything anyone could want. I know. Then tell them. Tell who? Whoever's asking, tell them I'm nobody. Adrian looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, something crossed his face that wasn't calm. Something small and tired, and she thought a little bit sad. Miss Hale, he said, if I tell them you are nobody, they will understand that to mean that you are somebody I don't want them to know about, and they will want to know why. And the faster way to find out is to take you and ask. That's insane. Yes. That's how these people think? That's how these people survive. She put her hand over her mouth. She didn't know she was doing it until she felt her own fingers against her lips. She lowered her hand and she looked at the fire, and she tried to make her breathing slow down, and it wouldn't, and she hated herself for it a little bit. She'd gone her whole life not letting things rattle her, and now, in a house she didn't own, across from a man she didn't know, her breath had decided it didn't belong to her anymore. How long, she said. How long what? How long do I have to stay here? He didn't answer for a moment. I don't know, he said. Give me a number. I can't. A week. A month. What? Tessa, I don't know. I'm going to make some calls today. I'm going to understand by tonight what the shape of this is. If it's small, we resolve it quietly. If it isn't, he let the sentence end itself. Then the answer is longer. I'm not going to tell you a number I don't know to make you feel better right now. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be something else. What would you like? I don't know. Anything. Lie to me a little. Be a normal person. Say it'll be fine. He almost smiled. It was so small she almost missed it. It'll be fine. See, that was terrible. You're bad at that. I know. She laughed. It surprised her. It was a short, rough sound, and it hurt her throat a little, and she pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes, and she laughed for maybe 3 seconds, and then she stopped because it was too close to the thing underneath it, and she wasn't going to do that here. He let her have the moment. He didn't try to fill it. I need things, she said finally. Name them. My phone, my charger, There's a woman at the diner. Marta. I just walked out on her. She's going to be worried. She's going to call the cops, and I have a prescription I'm supposed to pick up tomorrow, and I have rent coming out of my account in 9 days. And I have my landlord, if I'm not there, Tessa, I'm talking. Let me talk. All right. She talked. She made a list out loud, and her voice got steadier as she went. The prescription. She wouldn't tell him what it was for, not yet, but she needed it. The rent. A box in her closet with her mother's things in it, the only thing she'd brought with her out of the Yonkers house, which she was not going to leave in an apartment somebody might come looking through. Her work clothes, her toothbrush, A framed photograph on her windowsill of a woman who'd been kind to her in a group home in 2014 and who died the following year, which Tessa hadn't looked at in months, but which she knew, with a certainty that embarrassed her, she would fall apart without. Adrian listened. He didn't interrupt. When she was done, he said, "All of it. Tonight. My people will go." "Your people?" "Yes. I don't want strangers in my apartment. I understand. Mr. Keller will go himself. He'll take photographs of everything before he touches anything. Nothing will be moved that you didn't ask for. He'll leave the rent in the super's mailbox. He'll explain something to your friend Marta. A plausible explanation, not the real one. If you'd like to write her a note, he'll deliver it. You've done this before." "Not exactly this. Something like it." "For who?" He looked at her. "You don't have to tell me," she said. I'm asking, who's the last woman you did this for?" "My sister." She hadn't expected that. "You're a long time ago. She's fine. She lives in another country now. She doesn't speak to me, but she's alive and she's fine. And that was the point." "Why doesn't she speak to you?" He looked at the fire, the amber drink still sitting on the table untouched. "Because I did for her what I'm about to do for you," he said. "And she decided she would rather have her old life back than the one I could give her. And I couldn't give her the old one back. Nobody could. So she left, and she doesn't call, and I don't blame her for it." Tessa sat with that for a moment. "Are you telling me that to warn me or to tell you the truth? That's all." "What if I decide the same thing?" "Then you do, but not today. Today is not a day you are allowed to decide anything. Today you are going to eat something because you haven't, and you are going to sleep in a room upstairs because you didn't really sleep last night either. And tomorrow we will talk about what you want. Not tonight. Tomorrow. You don't get to tell me when I'm allowed to decide things." "No," he agreed. "I don't. I'm asking." She looked at him. She looked at the door. She looked at the window, the gravel drive, the gate she couldn't see, the trees. She looked at her own hands in her lap, red knuckles, a burn on the side of her thumb from the coffee urn at the diner, the nail on her ring finger chewed down to the quick. And she thought about the fact that she hadn't eaten since a piece of toast at 6 this morning, and she hadn't slept more than 4 hours, and her body was running on the kind of adrenaline that was about to send her the bill. "Okay," she said. He nodded. He didn't make a show of it. He just stood up and crossed to the door and opened it, and the woman in the gray blouse was already there, as if she'd known, as if this house operated on a frequency Tessa couldn't hear. "This is Mrs. Carver," Adrian said. "She runs the house. She'll take you upstairs. There's a room made up for you. If you want food, she'll bring it. If you want to be left alone, she'll leave you alone. If you want anything at all, you ask her. And if she can't do it, she'll tell you, and we'll find someone who can." "Mrs. Carver," Tessa said. "Ma'am." The woman's voice was low and steady. 60s, maybe. Gray hair pulled back, a small gold cross at her throat that Tessa noticed and then tried not to notice. She had the kind of face you'd trust to hold your child for a minute while you tied your shoe. "I'm not... Please don't call me ma'am." "Yes, Miss Hale." "Tessa, please." Mrs. Carver glanced very briefly at Adrian. He gave her nothing. She looked back at Tessa, and her face softened by some tiny increment, and she said, "Tessa, of course. Would you like to come with me?" Tessa stood up. Her legs worked. That was a pleasant surprise. She was almost at the door when she stopped and turned back. "Adrian?" He looked up. She'd used his first name. She hadn't meant to. "The prescription," she said. "I'm not going to tell you what it's for, not today, but it matters. I can't not take it." "Understood." "I'm serious." "So am I. It will be in this house tonight. I promise you." She held his eyes for a second longer. Then she nodded, and she followed Mrs. Carver out of the room. The stairs were wide enough for 3 people. The carpet was the color of dark wine, so thick her sneakers made no sound at all. Mrs. Carver walked a step ahead of her, hands folded in front of her, and she didn't make conversation, which Tessa was grateful for. She didn't think she could have answered anything right now. They passed a hallway, another hallway, a set of double doors that were closed. At the top of the second flight, Tessa heard it, a small, high, ordinary sound, so out of place in this enormous silent house that she almost stopped walking. A child laughing, just for a second, somewhere above and to the left. A boy, maybe. Young. Mrs. Carver didn't react. "Is there—" Tessa started. "This way, miss." "Tessa, just here." The room she was led to was bigger than her apartment. She actually laughed when she saw it, a small, incredulous sound, because the bed alone would have taken up half her studio. The windows looked out over the back lawn. There were fresh flowers on the dresser. Fresh flowers. In March. "The bathroom is through there," Mrs. Carver said. "There are clothes in the closet. I don't know if they will fit exactly." "We guessed? If they don't, tell me and I will get others by evening. The shower has hot water all the time, not only Tuesdays." Tessa looked at her. Mrs. Carver's face didn't change, but there was a glint in her eye that might have been the beginning of something. "He told you," Tessa said, "about the Tuesdays. He mentioned it. Jesus." "I'll bring food in a little while. Sleep if you can. The door locks from the inside." "It does?" "Yes." "Why are you telling me that?" "Because I thought you'd want to know," Mrs. Carver said. And then, after the smallest pause, "He's a difficult man, Mr. Voss. He is not, however, the kind of man who would hurt a woman sleeping in his house. I have worked for him for 11 years. I would not be here if he were." Tessa looked at her. That's a strange thing to say to me." "It's exactly the thing I'd want said to me if I were you." She left before Tessa could answer. The door clicked shut behind her. Tessa stood in the middle of the enormous room with her apron still knotted at her waist and her hand on the strap of her purse, and she listened for a long moment to a house she didn't know. Then she walked to the door and she turned the lock. It made a small, satisfying sound. She sat down on the edge of the bed. The mattress gave under her like something alive. She put her purse down beside her and she looked at her own hands and she saw that they had started shaking again, just a little, now that there was no one to see them. Her body had been holding itself together all morning and now it was deciding quietly to stop. She lay down. She didn't get under the covers. She didn't take off her shoes. She lay on her side on top of a comforter that probably cost more than she made in a month, and she pulled her knees up toward her chest and she closed her eyes. She was asleep in under 3 minutes. She woke up to the sound of a knock. The light through the window was different, thinner, lower, afternoon light. She sat up fast and for a second she didn't know where she was. Then she did. She pushed her hair out of her face and she ran her tongue over her teeth. She needed a toothbrush, badly. She needed a shower. And she said hoarsely, "Yeah?" "It's Mrs. Carver." She unlocked the door. Mrs. Carver had brought a tray. Soup, bread, sliced fruit, a pot of tea. She also had, in her other hand, a small cardboard box, the corners softened with handling. "Your things arrived," she said. "Mr. Keller brought them up a moment ago. I didn't want to wake you. Would you like them now or later?" Tessa stared at the box. "Now," she said. Mrs. Carver set the tray on the little desk by the window. She put the box on the bed beside Tessa. She did not linger. "He'll be in the library when you want to come down," she said. "No hurry. Take your time." "Thank you." Mrs. Carver paused at the door. "Miss Tessa?" "Yes?" "Your landlord was—" A small hesitation. "Mr. Keller said the front door of your building had been forced when he arrived. He said the lock on your apartment door had not been, yet, but there were marks on it. He wanted me to tell you. Mr. Voss said you would want to know." Tessa felt her mouth go dry. "When?" "Not long before Mr. Keller got there. An hour, maybe 2. "Okay. Is there anything else you need?" No, thank you." The door closed again. Tessa sat very still on the bed for a long time. Then she opened the box. Her toothbrush, her charger, her phone, with a note taped to the screen in handwriting she didn't recognize. "Battery is dead, we didn't charge it. You may want to be the first person to turn it on." The framed photograph, wrapped carefully in a dish towel. Her work shoes. A brown paper bag from the pharmacy on her corner. She opened it, saw the orange bottle with her name on the label, and felt a small, embarrassing surge of gratitude so sharp it almost made her teeth ache. Her prescription, 30 days, same dosage. He'd done it. He'd said he would, and he had. Under the pharmacy bag was the small wooden box that held her mother's things. Her mother's wedding ring, which her mother had hawked twice, and bought back twice before she'd finally given it to Tessa at the front door of the group home, saying, "Don't lose it, honey. It's the only real thing I ever had." A hair comb. A photograph of a woman Tessa had been told was her grandmother, but which she wasn't sure she believed. And at the very bottom of the cardboard box, something she hadn't asked for. Something she'd forgotten was even in the apartment. A paperback. The Thornbirds. Worn soft, the spine cracked, the pages yellow. It had belonged to the woman in the photograph on her windowsill, Deborah Langley, who'd run the group home in 2014, who'd given Tessa this book and told her it was a trash novel that would still teach her something about love. Tessa hadn't read it in 5 years. She'd forgotten it was on the shelf. Mr. Keller had noticed. Or Adrian had told him to notice. Or somebody had thought this woman might want one of her books, and had chosen this one without knowing anything about it. Tessa put her hand flat on the cover, and she sat there for a long time. Then she got up, and she went into the bathroom, and she took a long hot shower in a house full of strangers, and she stood with her face under the water, and she let herself finally, for about 2 minutes, stop being brave. When she came downstairs, the sun was going. The library fire had been fed again. Adrian was standing at the far end of the room with a phone to his ear, not a cell phone, a landline. And he was speaking, low, in what sounded like Italian. He saw her in the doorway. He held up one finger, apologetic, and kept talking for another 40 seconds. Then he said something short and final and hung up. "You slept." "A little." "Good." She stood in the doorway. She was wearing clothes from the closet, jeans that fit almost too well, a soft sweater the color of oatmeal, socks she didn't own. She'd left her hair wet. She'd left her face bare. She didn't know why she'd done either of those things. "My apartment," she said. "I know. They weren't after you. Not this fast. They were after the photograph. They wanted to know if there was more. Papers, a laptop, a second phone. Anything that would tell them who you were to me. When Mr. Keller's people arrived, they left." "His people?" "Yes." "How many people?" "4. "You sent 4 men to pack my toothbrush?" "Yes." "Jesus, Adrian." "I know." She stepped into the room. She crossed to the fire and she held her hands out to it, not because she was cold, because she wanted something to do with her hands. She could feel him behind her. She could feel the room, the weight of it, the particular silence of a place where difficult conversations had been had for a very long time. "Who were you on the phone with?" "A man named Salvatore Marchetti, which is the head of one of the families I mentioned this morning, an old man, old enough to remember manners." "What did you tell him?" "I told him that any further attempts to approach you, or to learn about you, or to photograph you, would be considered a personal matter between him and me. I told him that I was asking this as a favor. I told him that I would remember the favor. And he asked me a question I wasn't expecting." "Which was?" Adrian was quiet for a moment. She turned to look at him. He was standing by the desk now, his hands in his pockets, his eyes on her in a way she couldn't quite read. "He asked me if you were mine," he said. Tessa's breath caught. "What did you say?" "I told him yes." The fire popped. Neither of them moved. "Adrian, I know. You can't. I know what I did, Tessa. That's not, you don't get to decide that." "I know." "Then why did you say it?" "Because the answer no was going to get you killed before the end of the week." She stared at him. "You're lying," she said. You could have said something else. You could have said I was a cousin, or a cousin gets killed too. A cousin gets taken and used. Any answer I gave Salvatore Marchetti that wasn't yes, she's mine. And anyone who touches her answers to me was going to be a hunting license. Do you understand what I'm telling you? You could have said I was nobody. I told you this morning why that doesn't work. Then don't tell him anything. Don't answer the call. He calls, Tessa. That's the point. He calls and I answer, or I become a problem, and I don't want to be a problem. Because when I'm a problem, people around me get hurt. And right now the person around me is you. So I answer. And I give him the only answer that keeps you breathing. I'm sorry. I didn't want to have this conversation with you tonight. I wanted to give you another day. She turned her face away from him. She looked into the fire. Her eyes were hot. Not tears, the heat of the fire, she told herself, just the fire. She pressed the back of her wrist against her eyelid anyway. I'm not yours, she said. I know. You don't get to say that and have it be. I know, I told him a useful lie. I am not asking you to live inside it. We are standing in a room where the two of us know the truth. That hasn't changed. It feels changed. I know! She laughed, one hard, broken sound. Stop saying that. I'm sorry. Stop saying that. He didn't. He just stood there with his hands in his pockets and waited. The way he'd waited on the curb last night, the way he'd waited in the alley, the way he seemed to have made a career of waiting for other people to catch up to information he'd already decided about. And Tessa pressed both hands flat to her thighs and tried to feel the floor under her feet. What does it mean? She said. When he thinks I'm yours, what does that mean? Functionally. What does it do? It does three things. It means no one moves on you without moving on me first. It means any information anyone gathers about you gets priced as a personal insult to me. And it means, in the eyes of the people who matter in this, matter in the ugly sense, not the good sense, you are a protected life. Like a wife, like a daughter, like a mother. That's the word he used. He said, "You're woman." I said, "Yes. You're woman." I'm telling you the word he used. Don't use it again. I won't. She took a long breath. She let it out. She did it again. The fire was loud in her ears, or her pulse was. She couldn't tell which. How do I go back? She said. Back where? To my life, to Mickey's, to the diner, to being a person who just served coffee and went home. How do I go back? He didn't answer right away, and she knew before he opened his mouth. You don't, he said. I'm sorry. Ever. Not as the woman who stood in that alley last night. That woman doesn't exist anymore. I'm not being dramatic, I'm being accurate. Whoever you are from now on, it's someone else. I wish that weren't true. It's true. She sat down on the arm of the nearest chair. She hadn't meant to. Her legs just decided. I didn't want this, she said. No. I didn't ask for... I was walking home. I know. I don't even know you. I don't know what you do, really. I don't know if you've hurt people. I don't know if you've... I have. She looked up at him. Yes, he said. Since you were going to ask, I have, more than once. I'm not going to tell you how many times, and I'm not going to tell you the names because neither of those things would help you. But yes, I've hurt people. Sometimes because I had to. Sometimes because I was told to. Sometimes because I was angry when I was younger, and those are the ones I think about. If you ask me whether the men in that alley last night are in a hospital or a morgue, I'll tell you one of them is in a hospital, and the other two are breathing and sore and very, very scared, and none of them will come near you again. If you ask me whether I feel bad about any of that, the answer is no. I should probably lie and say yes, but I'm not going to lie to you. Not about that. The room was very quiet. Why aren't you lying? She said. About which part? Any of it. You could say anything to me right now and I wouldn't know. I don't know you. You could tell me any story. Why are you being so honest? Yes. He didn't answer right away. Because I'm 51 years old, he said finally, and I've been lied to by enough people for enough years that I know exactly what the thing sounds like on the other end. And I decided 20 years ago that I wasn't going to be that for anyone who didn't deserve it. I lie to the Salvatore Marchettis of this world. I don't lie to the people in my house. I'm not in your house. He looked at her, very steady. You're in my house tonight, Tessa. That's what we're talking about. She didn't answer. Mrs. Carver knocked on the frame of the open door softly, a small silver tray. 2 cups, a teapot, a small plate of something, shortbread maybe. She set it on the low table between the chairs, and she said nothing, and she left, and the door clicked closed behind her. Adrian didn't move toward the tea. Can I ask you something? Tessa said. Yes. I heard a kid, upstairs, earlier. Something in his face changed. Not much. A loosening around the eyes. She couldn't read it. Yes, he said. Your kid. Yes. Kids, plural? Sounded like more than one. 2, a boy and a girl, 9 and 6. And their mother, not in this house. Where? Not anywhere. She died 4 years ago, in a car on the Sawmill River Parkway on a Tuesday. I don't want to talk about it tonight. Tessa closed her eyes. Okay, she said. I'll tell you sometime. Just not tonight. Okay? The children know you're here, not who you are. Just that there's a woman staying in the East guest room who's had a hard night and needs to be left alone. They were told not to come down, and they won't. Mrs. Carver has them in the kitchen. They are having pasta. You will not meet them tonight unless you want to. Tomorrow I would like you to meet them, if you're willing. That's all. That's the whole of it. She opened her eyes. You have kids. Yes. And you said this morning about... She couldn't finish. She couldn't say the word. Yes, he said. And it still doesn't change anything. How? How what? How does it not change anything? You have children? You already have children. So what am I... What's the... Tessa. No, I'm asking. I'm really asking. What am I supposed to do with that? Nothing tonight. I'm asking you to do nothing tonight. She looked at him. She looked at her hands. She looked at the tea that neither of them had touched. I want to go to bed, she said. All right. Not your bed. I don't mean... I know what you meant. Okay. She stood up. He didn't. She walked to the door. At the door she stopped and she turned and her voice came out thinner than she wanted it to. Adrian? Yes. The prescription. You had someone pick it up from my pharmacy. How? My pharmacy wouldn't... You'd have needed my ID, my insurance. He was quiet. Who picked it up? She said. Someone with your ID. You don't need to ask the next question. I had someone print something. It went back in the bag. Nothing you own is anywhere it shouldn't be. I'm telling you this because you were going to wonder later and lose sleep over it. I'd rather you know now. You had someone make me a fake ID. For one afternoon, yes. Jesus, Adrian, I know. What kind of person? The kind you've been having this conversation with all day, he said. Tessa, I'm not trying to shock you. I'm trying to be accurate about what I am. You can decide what to do with that tomorrow. Tonight, I'm glad you have your medicine. She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, Good night. Good night, Tessa. She went upstairs. Mrs. Carver was in the hallway, not doing anything, just present, the way she'd been present all day. She nodded Tessa to her door and didn't follow her. Tessa went in. She locked it. She stood in the middle of the room for a moment, and she looked at the window, the lawn, the trees going purple in the last of the light, and she thought about how many windows and how many houses she'd never stood at in her life, and how strange it was that tonight it was this one. She took her medicine. She drank a glass of water from the carafe by the bed. She got under the covers with her clothes still on, and she lay there staring at the ceiling, which was higher than any ceiling she'd ever slept under. Somewhere down the hall, a child laughed again. A girl this time, high and bright and ordinary. Tessa turned on her side, and she pressed her face into the pillow, and she felt, for the second time that day, her chest do the thing it had done in the library. That small, internal shifting, that half-inch movement of something she had been carrying without knowing it. She'd told him she couldn't have children. He had a daughter. She didn't know what that meant yet. She didn't know if she was allowed to know. She closed her eyes, and down in the kitchen, 2 floors below, a little girl laughed at something her father's housekeeper had said, and Tessa Hale, who had thought 24 hours ago that the biggest problem in her life was a hole in her sneaker, let the sound carry her down into a sleep she hadn't asked for and hadn't earned, in a room that wasn't hers, in a house that was already starting, against every instinct she had, to feel a little bit like somewhere she'd been before. She didn't dream. That was mercy, of a kind. Outside, past the long lawn and the low stone wall, a black sedan sat in a turnout on the county road with its lights off and its engine idling, and 2 men inside it watched the gate and said nothing, and waited for instructions that would not come tonight, but would come certainly, tomorrow, or the day after that. The house slept. The men in the car did not. And somewhere in the library, Adrian Voss sat alone by a dying fire with the amber drink he hadn't touched all evening and a phone in his other hand, and he looked at a photograph someone had sent him 3 hours ago. A grainy shot taken from across the street of Mickey's diner, a woman in an apron laughing at something a customer had said, last November, at 4 in the morning. And he turned the phone face down on the table, and he closed his eyes. And for a very long time, he did not move at all. The men in the car were gone by morning. They'd been replaced. That was the thing Tessa would understand later, when she started to understand how any of this worked, that the car in the turnout on the county road was never the same car 2 nights in a row, that the men inside it were not always the same men, that the watching was a shift schedule the way her work at Mickey's had been a shift schedule, only the product was different. She woke at 6 again. She couldn't help it. She lay in the enormous bed and she stared at the high ceiling and she listened to a house she didn't know. And for a long moment she couldn't figure out what was wrong, and then she did. It was the quiet. Her apartment had never been quiet. There was the radiator that clanked, the upstairs neighbor with the dog that never got walked enough, the trucks on 47th grinding their gears at 4 a.m. She'd slept through all of it for 4 years because her body had learned to. Here, there was nothing. Just the faint tick of something heating somewhere below her, and the small wind moving through the bare trees outside the window. She lay there for maybe 15 minutes before she trusted her legs. She brushed her teeth. She washed her face with water that came out hot on the first turn of the knob, which felt, stupidly, like a luxury. She dressed in the jeans and sweater she'd worn yesterday because she didn't yet feel entitled to the rest of the clothes in the closet. She stood at the door for a long time with her hand on the knob, and she thought about how you went downstairs in a house that wasn't yours, and she realized she didn't know. She opened the door. The hallway was empty. The carpet swallowed her footsteps. She passed the stairs going down. She wasn't quite ready for down yet. She wanted to see the house in the light, and she walked to the window at the end of the long hallway and looked out at the back. A man was on the lawn, not a gardener. A man in a dark jacket standing very still under a bare tree, hands clasped behind his back, watching something she couldn't see. He didn't move for the whole minute she watched him. Then, without turning his head, he lifted his wrist and said something into it, and walked, unhurried, along the line of trees and disappeared around the side of the house. She stepped back from the window. He's been there since 4. Tessa jumped. She actually jumped, a full inch off the floor, her hand flying up to her chest. And she turned, and there was a boy standing 6 feet behind her in his socks. He was maybe 9. Dark hair like his father's, a cowlick he hadn't brushed down yet, pajama pants with planets on them, and a t-shirt that said Brooklyn Cyclones in faded letters. He was holding a small plastic cup of orange juice in both hands. He'd been watching her watch the man on the lawn, and he didn't look startled by her at all. "Jesus," Tessa said. She put her hand down. "I'm sorry. You scared me." "Sorry. I walk quiet." "It's okay. I wasn't expecting—" "You're the woman in the guest room." "Yes." "Mrs. Carver said we weren't supposed to bother you." "You're not bothering me." He considered that. He took a careful sip of his orange juice. He was studying her the way a boy studies a new dog at a neighbor's house, trying to figure out from the face whether it bit. "I'm Danny," he said. "Tessa." "Tessa what?" She almost laughed. The pattern of the Voss household apparently established early. "Hale. Tessa Hale." "Like Nathan Hale." "Who?" "Revolution guy. I have to do a report on him. He said he only regretted that he had one life to give for his country, then they hanged him. It was the British." "Oh, yeah, him. Are you related?" "Probably not." "Okay." He took another sip. He stood there. She didn't know what to do. She'd never really known how to talk to children. There had been children, occasionally, at the group homes, younger ones, but you kept your distance because getting attached was how you got hurt when they moved them. And she looked down at this small boy in planet pajamas, and she realized she had absolutely no frame for the next 30 seconds of her life. "My dad said you had a bad night." "I did, a little. He said not to ask you about it." "He's right." "Okay." He drank his juice. He looked down at his own socked feet. One of the socks had a hole over the big toe. She felt, abruptly, some unreasonable fondness for him because of it. "Is your sister up too?" Mia's still sleeping. She sleeps late. She's 6. She sleeps like the dead. Kind of a dramatic thing for a 9-year-old to say. That's what Mrs. Carver says. Mrs. Carver sounds right. He almost smiled. He didn't quite commit to it. He looked at her for another second, really looked, the way kids look when they're deciding something. And then he said very seriously, "My dad doesn't have women here." I'm just saying, he doesn't. So what? I don't know. I just wanted to say it. You seem okay. Thanks. You're welcome. He turned with the careful dignity of a 9-year-old who just delivered a speech, and he padded back down the hallway in his planet pajamas, with his hand cupped protectively around his orange juice. At the door to what must have been his room, he stopped and looked back at her. "Breakfast is downstairs," he said. "Mrs. Carver makes French toast on Saturdays. It's not Saturday, but she might." "Okay. Okay." He went into his room. The door closed. Tessa stood in the hallway for a long moment, and she put her hand against the wall because she needed to, and she wasn't entirely sure why. Bam! Adrian was in the kitchen. Not the library, not the dining room. The actual kitchen. A long stone-topped island, a wall of copper pans hanging from hooks, windows that looked out over a vegetable garden that was still asleep under the last of the winter. He was in a charcoal sweater and jeans. It was the first time she'd seen him in anything but a suit, and it did something strange to the shape of him. He looked like a man, just a man, standing at his own kitchen island reading the paper with a mug in his hand. He looked up when she came in. He didn't make a thing of it. "Morning?" "Morning. Coffee?" "Please." He poured her a mug from a French press she would have killed for at Mickey's. He slid it across the island. Black. He'd noticed at some point that she drank hers black, and he hadn't asked and he hadn't offered cream, and she didn't know how to feel about that, so she took the mug and held it in both hands and stood on the other side of the island from him, and for a minute neither of them said anything. "I met your son," she said. His eyebrows lifted. "In the hall?" "In the hall, about 4 minutes ago. He was supposed to leave you alone. He told me that. Then he told me you don't have women in the house. And then he left." Adrian closed his eyes for a second. Christ. He was very polite about it. "I'm going to talk to him." "Don't. He's 9. He's allowed to say what he sees. He also told me breakfast is downstairs, which, useful." Adrian looked at her for a long second over the top of his mug. Something in his face. Not a smile. Not quite. Something moving underneath. "He's not usually that direct," he said. "Maybe I bring it out in him." "Maybe." Mrs. Carver appeared from a side door with a bowl of eggs. She took in Tessa at the island, Adrian with his mug, the particular configuration of the two of them. And her face did nothing at all, which Tessa was starting to suspect was how Mrs. Carver said things. She set the bowl down and she said, "French toast, Miss Tessa?" "Oh, I don't... Whatever's easy." "French toast is easy." "Then yes, please. Thank you." Mrs. Carver started cracking eggs. Tessa leaned her elbows on the island. Adrian folded his paper. "You slept," he said. "A little." "More than a little. Mrs. Carver checked on you at 11. You were still in your clothes." "I was tired." "I know." "What about you?" He shrugged, barely. "Some." "Some meaning what?" "Meaning 2 hours. It's enough." "That's not enough." "It is for me. I've been running on it for 20 years. She looked at him over the rim of her mug. He looked back, and she saw something she hadn't quite seen yet. The small things. The lines at the corner of his eyes. The way his hand trembled, just slightly, when he set the mug down. The scar through his eyebrow, in daylight, paler than she'd thought. "You're 51. "Yes." "You said that yesterday. I don't know why it stuck with me." "It's not a particularly interesting age." "You look tired, I know. I was going to say younger." "You were going to lie." "Maybe." Mrs. Carver didn't turn from the stove, but Tessa could have sworn from a certain angle that one of her shoulders moved in something adjacent to a laugh. "Eat," Adrian said. "Then we'll talk about today." "What's today?" A few things. Someone is coming to measure you for clothes. That's the first thing. I won't have you wearing Mrs. Carver's niece's jeans indefinitely. These are Mrs. Carver's niece's jeans? They are, Mrs. Carver said over her shoulder. She's your size, more or less. She works at a bank. Does your niece know I'm wearing her jeans? She does not. Oh, God. It's fine, dear. Second thing, Adrian said. I'd like you to meet Mia, my daughter. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be anything. But I'd like her to see you, and I'd like you to see her, because the alternative is my 6-year-old being told there's a stranger in the house and not being allowed to lay eyes on you, and my 6-year-old will take that badly. Okay. And third, I need to talk to you about what last night meant, the phone call, and what it's going to mean this week specifically, because there are going to be consequences of me having said what I said. Consequences to me. To both of us. More to me, probably. I want you to know them in advance. I'm not going to surprise you. She set the mug down. Her hands had decided this morning to be steady, which she appreciated. Okay? Eat first. I don't need to... Eat first, Tessa, please. Mrs. Carver slid a plate in front of her. 3 thick slices of French toast dusted with something powdered, a small pitcher of warm syrup, a dish of berries that did not belong to March in any state she'd ever lived in. Tessa looked down at the plate and realized she was suddenly, violently hungry. The kind of hunger that only hit you when you'd stopped running for a moment and your body caught up to the fact that you hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. She ate. She didn't apologize for how much she ate. That was something, she thought. That was something she would go back and look at later. They talked in the library again, because that was where this house did talking. The fire had been laid fresh that morning, but not lit yet. The day outside was gray and very still. Adrian took the chair across from her, the same one as last night, and he put his hands loosely in his lap and he said, Salvatore Marchetti called me back at 5 this morning. You were awake. I was awake. What did he want? He wanted to tell me he'd spoken to 3 other men overnight. He wanted me to know who, specifically. He told me because it was a courtesy. He was giving me the names before I asked. That's how he does things. He's 81 years old. He thinks the younger generation has lost its manners. Who? It doesn't matter for you to know the names. What matters is what the calls did. They did 2 things. 1, they confirmed to everyone who matters that you are, in fact, under my protection. That's good for you. It means no one will make a stupid move in the next 72 hours because no one wants to be the man who made the stupid move. 2, they told every one of those men that Adrian Voss, who has been a bachelor for 4 years, who has not been seen with a woman in public since his wife died, has taken a waitress from Hell's Kitchen into his home. And that is the kind of information that travels in this city whether or not you want it to. Meaning by this afternoon, a photograph of you from the diner. Any photograph, there are 100. You worked in front of a plate glass window for 4 years. Will be in the hands of journalists, federal agents, rival families, and at least 3 women who will call me personally before the weekend is out. Journalists? Not the tabloid kind. The kind that keep files. The kind that write the obituary before you're dead so they can publish fast when you are. They've had a file on me for a long time. They'll update it today. Federal agents. Yes. Am I going to have FBI agents at my door? You don't have a door anymore, Tessa. At this door. No, not at this one. They don't come to this house. They know where it is. They don't come. Why? Because they and I have an understanding that keeps both of us usefully unembarrassed. I pay taxes on a legitimate business. I don't do certain things on American soil that they would be required to notice. They don't knock. It works. You don't do certain things on American soil. That's correct. Adrian. I'm telling you the truth. You asked. I did ask. Yeah. Okay. She pressed her hands together between her knees. She looked at the cold fireplace. She tried to keep up. Are they dangerous to me? She said. The journalists. The feds. Not directly, not physically, but they can make your life, the life you had, impossible to go back to in a way that is different from the way the Marchettis can make it impossible. The Marchettis make it impossible by putting hands on you. The feds make it impossible by subpoenas, by calls to your old employers, by a very gentle man in a cheap suit knocking on the door of every person you have ever known and asking questions about you in a way that sounds friendly and isn't. That's the other reason you can't go back to Mickey's. It isn't just the men in the alley, it's the rest of it.
Jesus. Yes. So I'm just, you're here. For now.
That's what I have to offer. It's not a small thing to offer, but it's not the thing you wanted, and I know it. She was quiet for a long moment. Tell me the third thing, she said. Which third thing? From the kitchen, you said there was a third thing you were going to tell me. Consequences, you said. You've told me about the journalists. You've told me about the feds. What else? He looked at her. He let out a breath. There's a woman, he said. Oh, not the way you just said, oh, not someone. He stopped. He looked, briefly, annoyed with himself. There is a woman who believed for a long time that she and I were going to end up together. She's been close to my family for years. She was a friend of my wife's before my wife died. After she made herself useful, with the children, with the house. For a long time, I accepted that. I shouldn't have. I was grateful, and I let her be around, and I let her think what she thought. I never said yes. I also never said no. That's on me. And now she's going to hear about you today, if she hasn't already. And she is not going to take it the way Salvatore Marchetti took it. What's her name? Her name is Claudia Bellini. Is she one of them? Family. Her father was. He's retired. He's old. She is not in the business, but she grew up in it. She has her own network, her own people, and she has been for 4 years telling herself a story about what her life was going to look like, and I have been letting her tell it. That is going to collapse today, and it is not going to collapse quietly, and I want you to know before it reaches you. Reaches me how? Phone calls, if she gets your number, which she will. A visit, if she decides she wants one, which she might. Nothing physical. She's not that kind of woman. But the rest of it. She can be cruel, Tessa. She can be very cruel in a quiet way. She knows how to find the soft places and press. Tessa looked at her own hands. What am I supposed to do? Nothing. You don't owe her a conversation. You don't owe her a meeting. You don't answer her calls if she gets the number. If she comes here, you don't see her. Mrs. Carver knows. Mr. Keller knows. She doesn't get past the front hall. But I didn't want you walking into this house thinking you were safe from that part of it, because you aren't. Not entirely. She's going to reach. Why are you telling me this? Because I promised you I wouldn't surprise you, and because if I let her hit you from out of the dark, you'd have every right to decide I wasn't worth whatever this is going to be, and I would rather eat the discomfort of telling you now. She nodded. She nodded very slowly. You and her, she said. You ever? No. Never. Never. I'm not proud of how I handled it. I let her live in the story because it was easier than telling her there was no story. That was cowardice. I'm telling you because I'm not going to do that to you. Okay. Tessa. I said okay. I heard you. He left it. He didn't press. He didn't defend himself more than he had. She appreciated that, in a way she didn't have words for yet. There was a small sound at the door. A girl. 6, exactly 6. You could see it in the proportion of her head to her shoulders, the way her knees still had that soft roundness. She was in a pink t-shirt and leggings with horses on them, and she had a stuffed rabbit under one arm by the ear, and she was holding onto the doorframe with both hands and peeking around it like she was hoping no one would see her, but also hoping someone would. Mia, I just want to look. Come here. She came. Not quickly. She walked to her father with very careful little steps, and she leaned against his knee, and she turned her head and she looked at Tessa with enormous brown eyes, and she said, in a voice like a small reed instrument, Are you the lady? I guess I am the lady, yeah. Danny said you were a lady. Danny's right. Are you going to live here? Mia. It's okay, Tessa said. She met the little girl's eyes. Her throat was doing something she didn't want it to. I don't know yet, sweetheart. I'm staying here for a little bit. That's all I know right now. Why? Because your dad is being kind to me. Okay.
Mia climbed into her father's lap without asking. She did it the way a cat does, like it had been established at some earlier date that she was welcome. And Adrian adjusted his arm around her without looking down and without missing a beat. She pressed her cheek against his sweater and she watched Tessa over her stuffed rabbit's ear. "You're pretty," she said. "Thank you. So are you." "I know." Adrian made a sound that might have been a cough. "Mia." "What?"
We don't say "I know" when someone gives us a compliment. Why? Because it's bragging. Okay, thank you. There you go. The little girl reached up and touched her father's jaw with one hand, absently, the way a child touches a parent when they're not really paying attention to the parent, just confirming the parent is still there. Tessa watched it. She couldn't stop watching it. She watched the hand and the sweater, and the way Adrian's head tilted just slightly toward his daughter without any conscious effort at all, and she felt something very bad start to happen in her chest, and she looked away. "Where's Danny?" Adrian said. "Eating." "Did he say hi to Miss Hale this morning?" "In the hallway, he told me." "Did he now?" "He said she was okay." "That's very generous of him." "I already thought she was okay," Mia said. Before he said, "Oh yeah. Yeah, she has a nice face." Tessa laughed. It came out wrong, wet, surprised, too much. And she covered her mouth, and she looked at Mia, and she said, "Thank you. That's the best thing anyone has said to me in a long time. You're welcome." "Mia," Adrian said, "go find Danny. Tell him we're going to the garden in 20 minutes. The two of you are going to show Miss Hale the garden. If she wants to come." "Do you want to come?" Yeah," Tessa said. "Yeah, I want to come." "Okay." Mia slid off her father's lap. She came around the chairs. She stopped in front of Tessa, and she stood there for a minute, studying her with the enormous calm of a small child who had not yet learned that staring was rude. Then she reached out, and very seriously, she patted Tessa's knee twice with her small flat hand. "It's okay that you had a bad night," she said. "Sometimes I do too." And she left. Tessa sat very still in the chair. Adrian looked at the door his daughter had just gone through. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. His face did a thing that Tessa couldn't entirely read, and then it settled, and he turned back to her. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. She's amazing." "She is." "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." "I'm fine, Adrian. Leave it." He left it. Mrs. Carver came in with more coffee. She didn't say anything about the fact that Tessa was staring at a knot in the wood of the chair's arm and not blinking and not moving. She set the tray down and she said, 20 minutes, Mr. Voss." "Thank you." Mrs. Carver left. "You don't have to go out there," Adrian said. "I'm going." "I'm telling you, you don't have to." "Adrian, I'm going." He nodded. "Okay," he said. The garden in March was mostly dirt. Dirt and the dark stalks of last year's tomatoes somebody hadn't pulled, and a low stone path that curved around a fountain that had been shut off for the winter. Danny was already out there in a parka 2 sizes too big, kicking at a pebble. Mia was in a puffy pink coat and pink boots, and she was holding a small plastic shovel she had not been given permission to have, and which Adrian, when he saw her with it, chose not to acknowledge. They showed Tessa the garden. They showed it to her with the total seriousness of children showing a new friend something they already knew was good. "Here is where the tomatoes go. Here is where the peas go, but we don't eat them because Danny hates peas. Here is where a rabbit lived last summer until something ate it. Don't tell Mia which animal ate it. Here is the fountain. You're not supposed to sit on the edge, but if you're careful, you can. Here is the corner where Mia buried a cat-shaped rock because it was dead. It wasn't dead, Mia. It was a rock. It was a cat rock. It had a face. It was a rock. Dad, I'm with your brother on this one. You guys are terrible." Danny laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind of laugh that sounded like a 9-year-old, and not like the carefully adult kid who'd told her in a hallway that his father didn't have women here. His father laughed too, shorter, smaller, but Tessa heard it, and she thought it was a sound he didn't make often. She filed that away somewhere. They walked her all the way to the back wall. Mia held her hand for part of it and didn't ask if she could, she just took it. the way small children took things that seemed like they would be allowed. Tessa let her. She let her, and she walked. And she looked at the bare garden, and she listened to a 9-year-old explain the difference between a carrot top and a parsley top, and she thought very quietly, don't. But her hand was holding a little girl's hand, and the little girl kept looking up at her, every few steps, to make sure she was still there. It was on the walk back that the man appeared. Not the one from this morning, a different one. Older, stocky, a black coat belted at the waist, walking fast across the lawn from the direction of the front gate. He stopped 20 feet from them, hands at his sides where Tessa could see them, and he said low and clipped, "Mr. Voss." Adrian's hand went without a sound to the back of Mia's coat. He gathered her against him in one motion. He didn't turn his head. "Danny," he said, "take your sister inside." "Dad, now." Danny was already moving. He didn't argue. He took his sister's free hand out of Tessa's and he pulled her with him, fast, and he didn't look back. And Mia made a small, confused sound, but she went with her brother because her brother was pulling hard, and her brother had never pulled her hard before. They disappeared through the side door of the house. Mrs. Carver was there waiting. She caught them, one in each arm, and the door closed. The man in the black coat hadn't moved. "Sir," he said, "front gate. She's at the front gate. She has Tomas with her. We've held them. She's asking for you." "She." "Miss Bellini." Adrian closed his eyes. It was the only time Tessa had ever seen him do that. Not in the alley, not in the car, not in this library at 2 a.m. He closed his eyes, and his jaw set, and he was angry. It was the first time she'd seen that too. And it was not a loud anger. It was a very quiet anger, the kind that lived inside a man whose whole job was deciding when not to be angry, and it was somehow worse for being quiet. "How long has she been there?" he said. 6 minutes. "She's not leaving. Tomas has one in his jacket." "He does?" "Yes, sir. Kroll saw it when they pulled up." "Tell Kroll not to shoot him." "Yes, sir. Tell Tomas that if he moves his hand off the wheel, I will personally put him in the river." "Yes, sir." "I'll be there in 2 minutes." "Yes, sir." The man turned and went, fast, across the lawn. Tessa was standing 3 feet from Adrian, and she hadn't moved. She wasn't sure she was breathing. Adrian turned to her. "Go inside." "Adrian?" "Tessa. Go inside. Now. Through the side door. Mrs. Carver will take you to the east room and you will sit there until I come for you." "You said she wouldn't." "I said she probably wouldn't. She did. Go." "Are you going to—" "Tessa." He had never raised his voice before. He didn't raise it now, but it did a thing, a sharpness in the middle of a sentence, a small crack, and she understood, in a way she hadn't fully understood yet, that this man had been performing calm for her for 36 hours, and that the performance was very expensive, and that something had just cost him more than he'd planned to pay this morning. She went. She walked fast to the side door. Mrs. Carver was there. Mrs. Carver's face was not calm anymore either. Her hands were shaking just slightly as she pulled the door open, and Tessa saw for the first time that under the housekeeper's gray blouse there was something, a small hard line under the fabric at the hip, and she didn't look at it again because she didn't want to know for sure. Mrs. Carver took her up a back stairs she hadn't seen before. She took her to the east room. She sat her in a chair near the window. She stood in the doorway with her arms folded, and she said, "Stay here, Miss Tessa. I'll be in the hall. If you hear anything, you lock this door. If you hear me tell you to lock the door, you lock it immediately. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Good." And she stepped out, and she pulled the door most of the way closed, and Tessa sat in a chair in an east-facing room and looked out at a driveway she could only partly see and waited to find out what kind of morning this was going to turn out to have been. Through the window, very faintly, she could hear voices. A woman's voice. Loud, at first. Then not loud. Then something else. And Adrian's voice, flat, short, cutting, the way she hadn't heard it before. She couldn't make out the words. She sat in the chair, and she pressed her palms against the arms of it, and she watched a branch tap against the window with the small wind, and she understood, finally, completely, that the life she'd been living at 6 o'clock yesterday morning, with its double shifts and its burnt toast and its $43, was not a life she was going to get back. Not because the Marchettis wouldn't let her, because something in her didn't want it back. That was the sentence when it came that scared her worst. She was still sitting there, very still, when she heard a car engine turn over down at the gate and heard it move off, hard, down the road, and heard, a long minute later, footsteps on the stairs, slow, even, measured, coming up to find her. The footsteps stopped outside the door. They didn't come in. They just waited. The way he'd been waiting for her since the alley, the way he apparently waited for everything. And she understood, without being told, that he was giving her the choice. She could stand up and open it, or she could sit in the chair and say, not yet. And he would go back down the stairs and come back later, and neither of them would call it what it was. Come in, she said. He did. He closed the door behind him. He didn't sit. He stood by the window a few feet from her chair, hands in his pockets, and she saw, for the first time since she'd met him, that his breathing wasn't quite right. It was shallow, controlled, the breath of a man who had just walked away from something he'd wanted to do and hadn't. She's gone, he said. I heard the car. I'm sorry. She wasn't supposed to get that far. I'm going to talk to the men at the gate. Don't punish them. I'm not going to. I'm going to talk to them. There's a difference. She looked at him. He didn't quite meet her eyes. He was looking at some point on the baseboard, or past it, and she realized she was seeing him, maybe, in the only moment he was going to let her see him in. The 30 seconds after something ugly, before the calm came back and put its jacket on again. What did she say? Tessa said. Nothing that matters. Tell me anyway. He was quiet. Adrian? She called you a few things. I don't want to repeat them. I'm a grown woman. I've been called things before. I'm sure you have. Tell me. He exhaled. He turned to the window finally, and he looked out at the driveway where a black sedan had been 7 minutes ago and was not anymore. And he said, in the same flat voice he'd used with the man on the lawn, she called you a stray. She said I'd lost my mind. She said my wife was going to... He stopped. Never mind that part. No, say it. She said my wife was going to turn in her grave. She said the children were going to hate me. She said she'd warn everyone she could that I was unwell. She said a number of things. She cried at the end. I don't know how much of that was real and how much of it was theater. I don't entirely know the difference with her anymore. I never did. What did you say? I told her never to come to this house again. I told her never to speak my children's names in my presence again. I told her that if she made one phone call about you, but one phone call to anyone, I would make sure her father spent the rest of his retirement somewhere that wasn't his house on Long Island. And then I had Kroll walk her back to her car. He said it the way another man might have said I asked her to leave. And Tessa sat very still, and she tried to feel what she should have felt. Alarm, maybe, or disgust, or the moral distance of a normal woman hearing a man threaten another woman, and she couldn't find any of it where it was supposed to be. What she found instead was something smaller and worse. A small, shameful, animal relief. That someone had stood between her and a bad thing. That someone had used what he had to use. You threatened her father, she said. Yes. Would you actually do it? Yes. Just because she called me a name. He turned from the window. He looked at her directly for the first time since he'd come in. No, he said. Not for that. I don't care what she called you. I care that she drove to my house with a man in her car who was armed 6 minutes after finding out you existed. That's the part she's going to live with. The name-calling I can forget. The car at my gate, I can't. Tessa looked down at her own hands. I don't want to be... What? I don't want to be the reason somebody's dad ends up in a... Wherever men like that end up. He's not going to end up anywhere. She's not going to make the call. She knows I meant it. That's what keeps it from happening. That's how this works, Tessa. The thing you don't want to have happen is the thing you have to be willing to make happen so that you don't have to. I know it doesn't sound good. It isn't. It's also true. I hate that. I know. I'm serious. I hate that. I hate that that's the sentence. I hate that it makes sense. I know, Tessa. She pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes. Not crying, just pressing, hard enough to see color. The kids, she said. They're fine. They saw... Danny's 9.
Danny's seen more than I'd like him to. Mia thinks a lady was mean at the gate and now she's gone. Mrs. Carver gave them ice cream, which is an abuse of power at 11 in the morning, but I'm going to allow it today. They were with me when... I know. I'm sorry about that. It shouldn't have happened while they were on the lawn. It won't again. They were holding my hand. Mia was. She was holding my hand, Adrian. I saw. She took her hands down. She looked at him. Her eyes felt hot. Her voice came out quieter than she wanted. I can't do this, she said. He didn't answer. I can't. I'm not the person. She stopped. She started again. I met your daughter 40 minutes ago. She held my hand for 5 minutes. I can't get it out of my chest. And I don't get to want that. I never have. That's not a door I'm allowed to stand in front of. And you're letting me stand in front of it. And I don't think you understand what you're doing. He was quiet for a long moment. Maybe I don't, he said. Don't just... I'm not placating you. I'm saying maybe I don't. I'm saying I married a woman I'd known since I was 22, and I had 2 children with her, and I watched her die in an emergency room in White Plains at 3 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. And for 4 years, I have not had the faintest idea what I'm doing with anything that isn't work or my kids. And now there is a woman sitting in the east guest room of my house who I pulled out of an alley 2 nights ago because I recognized her from a diner, and I am telling you what I can tell you honestly about what I want. And the honest thing is that I don't entirely know. I know I don't want you to leave. I know I would like you to meet my son properly, not in a hallway. I know that my daughter held your hand for 5 minutes this morning, and I watched your face and something happened in it that I want to be careful with. That's what I know. The rest of it I don't know. I'm 51 years old and I am telling you I don't know. I thought you should hear it from me. She stared at him. That was a very long speech for you. Yes. You don't talk like that. No. Why did you just talk like that? Because you said I was letting you stand in front of a door you weren't allowed to stand in front of, and I wanted you to know that I wasn't letting you stand in front of anything. I'm standing in front of it too. I don't know what's behind it either. I'm telling you so you don't think I'm lying to you. That's all. She didn't answer. She couldn't for a long moment. She turned her face to the window and she watched the branch tap the glass and she tried to make her breath do what she told it to do, and it wouldn't, quite. I need a minute, she said. Take it. He didn't leave. He didn't make a show of leaving. He just walked, quietly, to a chair on the far side of the room, and he sat down in it, and he looked at his own hands, and he waited. She took her minute. She took 3 of them. Outside, somewhere on the grounds, a car started and drove off. The gate again, somebody coming or going, and then it was quiet. She watched the branch. She thought about her mother's ring in the little box in her room. She thought about Deborah Langley's copy of The Thornbirds. She thought about the hole in Danny's sock. She thought about Mia's hand, dry and small and warm, taking hers on a path without asking. Okay, she said. Adrian looked up. Okay, what? Okay, I'm not leaving today. I'm not saying anything bigger than that. I'm just saying, today. I'm here today. Tomorrow we can have the next conversation. That's more than fair. I also want to meet your son. For real, not in the hallway. Okay. And I don't want to meet any more women at your gate. I'm going to make every effort. Adrian, Tessa, I don't control other people. I control how quickly I send them home. I'm going to make every effort. Fine. Good. She stood up. Her legs were a little unsteady, but they worked. She walked past his chair, and at the door she stopped, and she didn't turn around, and she said, The alley, night before last, when you broke that guy's arm. Yes. Did you mean to? He was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said. Okay. Does it matter? I don't know yet. Fair. She opened the door. Adrian. Yes. Thank you for telling me about her before I found out some other way. You're welcome. She went down the hall to the stairs and down the stairs, and on the landing she stopped and she put her hand on the banister and she realized her shoulders hadn't been up around her ears for about 40 minutes,
and she couldn't remember the last time before this house that her shoulders hadn't been up around her ears. She thought, this is how it happens. She thought, this is the exact middle of how it happens. She went down to find Mrs. Carver because she didn't know what else to do with herself, and because she had figured out somewhere in the last day and a half that Mrs. Carver was the thing in this house closest to a fixed point. 3 days passed. That was the strange part. That was the part she would try later to tell anyone about and fail. The ordinariness of it. The way a life that had been unrecognizable on Monday became, by Thursday, a thing with a rhythm. Mornings, she ate breakfast in the kitchen with Adrian. He read the paper. She drank coffee. Sometimes Danny came down in his planet pajamas. Sometimes Mia came down already dressed, because Mia apparently woke up dressed, which Tessa could not understand. Mrs. Carver made eggs. Mrs. Carver made toast. Mrs. Carver made once blueberry pancakes with a shape that was supposed to be a rabbit, but came out more like a splat, which made Mia laugh so hard she fell off her stool, and which made Adrian look up from his paper with an expression Tessa had not seen on his face before and did not entirely know how to look at. Mornings, after breakfast, she walked the grounds. Mr. Keller walked with her, always at a slight distance, always pretending to be doing something else. She learned his first name was Benjamin, and that he had been a police officer in Queens for 14 years before he'd come to work for Adrian, and that he had a wife named Esther and 2 grown daughters he called every Sunday. He told her all of this over 3 different walks, in 3 small installments, like a man who had been told to let her get comfortable with him and was doing it at a pace he'd calculated for a nervous dog. She didn't mind it. That was the thing that surprised her most. She didn't mind being followed. She had, somewhere around the 3rd morning, realized that what she'd been reading as surveillance was something closer to escort, and the difference mattered to her in a way she couldn't have articulated before. A woman came on the 2nd day and measured her for clothes. Not a tailor from a store, a woman from an apartment somewhere in the city who came up with a soft leather bag full of measuring tape and chalk and did the whole thing in 40 minutes in Tessa's bedroom without small talk. 2 days after that, a small delivery showed up. Clothes. Real clothes, in Tessa's actual size. Jeans, sweaters, 2 dresses she'd never put on, but would look at in the closet the way she might look at a Rothko, not sure whether she was supposed to understand it. There were also, in a small separate box, 3 pairs of shoes. One of them was a pair of dark flat sneakers, plain, unbranded, with a note inside in Adrian's handwriting that said, "For the ones with the hole." She'd sat on the edge of the bed and held the note for a long time. The FBI didn't come. Neither did the tabloid photographers. Adrian mentioned both of them once, at dinner on the 2nd night, in the offhand voice he used for things he'd already solved. The feds are holding. That could change. She didn't ask what he meant by holding. She was learning there were questions she wasn't going to get real answers to, and that they were, strangely, often the questions she cared about least. The men at the gate changed every 12 hours. Claudia Bellini did not come back. And the 3rd morning, a Thursday, a real one, March gray and thin. Tessa came downstairs at 7:40, and Adrian was not in the kitchen. Mrs. Carver was. Mrs. Carver was pouring coffee for herself, which Tessa had never seen her do. She looked up when Tessa came in, and her face did that thing Tessa had come to recognize, the thing Mrs. Carver did instead of reacting, and she said, "There was a call this morning. Mr. Voss left at 4. I am to tell you he'll be back by lunch and not to worry." "Is everything?" "Yes, Miss Tessa. Everything is in hand." "That's not what I asked." Mrs. Carver looked at her for a long moment over the coffee. "No," she said. "It isn't. I'm sorry. I'm instructed not to tell you more." "By him." "By him." "Okay." "He also said, if you asked, I was to tell you he was not doing anything you would be ashamed of." "He said that." "He did. That's not reassuring?" "No, Miss Tessa. I don't think he meant it to be." Mrs. Carver set down her coffee. She reached under the counter and brought up a folded piece of paper and slid it across to Tessa. "He left this for you. He asked me to give it to you only if you came down before 10. If you came down after 10, he said he'd have been back by then and would give it to you himself." Why would it matter when I came down? "He said some things read differently at different hours of the morning, Miss Tessa. I don't know what he meant. That's what he said." Tessa unfolded it. It was his handwriting.
The same as the business card. The same as the note with the sneakers. Tessa, there's a man in the city who spent yesterday afternoon asking questions about you at the diner, at your old apartment, and at the pharmacy on your corner. He's a journalist. Not the federal kind. The other kind. He's going to publish something this weekend whether I talk to him or not. So I'm going to talk to him, because if I don't, what he publishes will be worse. I'll be back by 1. I'm sorry to leave without saying it in person. I didn't want to wake you, and I didn't want you to hear about the story from someone else this morning and wonder whether I'd seen it coming. I saw it coming. I'm trying to be where I said I'd be, which is not surprising you. Hey, she read it twice. She folded it. Mrs. Carver? Yes, Miss Tessa. Is what he's doing, is it a sit down at a restaurant, or is it... He went to a hotel, Miss Tessa, with Mr. Keller and 2 other men. The journalist is also at the hotel. Nothing bad is going to happen to the journalist. Mr. Voss doesn't do that to journalists. He's going to buy him a very long breakfast. Okay. Would you like eggs? Yeah, I would like eggs. Sit down, Miss Tessa.
She sat down. She ate her eggs and she drank her coffee, and she read the note 2 more times before she put it in the pocket of her jeans. She understood, reading it a 4th time, the thing he'd meant about the hour of the morning. He hadn't wanted her to sit with it alone for long. He'd wanted to be walking back through the door about the time she was finishing her 2nd cup. She would have hated it, she thought, if she'd read it at 5 a.m. At 8:30, Danny came down. He was dressed, which meant Mrs. Carver had already done a pass at him, and he had a book under his arm. Is Dad gone? Work thing. He'll be back this afternoon. Okay. He sat across from her at the island. He opened the book. It was a biography of Nathan Hale, Tessa noticed, and he was about a 1/3 through it. Danny. Yeah. Can I ask you something? Yeah. Is your dad... How's he been lately? Before I got here, I mean. Danny looked up. He considered the question the way he'd considered her in the hallway the first morning, carefully, without rushing. Quieter, he said. Quieter than what? Than he used to be. Than he was before my mom died. I don't remember a lot, but I remember he used to laugh, like, at things, stupid things, and then he didn't for a while. And now he does sometimes, but he does it weird, like he's not sure he's allowed. Tessa didn't know what to say to that. Are you mad at me for being here? She said. No. You sure? Yeah, I'm sure. Why? He shrugged. It was a very 9-year-old shrug. He's less weird when you're here, and Mia likes you. Mia's a pain in the ass. Danny, Mrs. Carver says I can't say that, but she says it too. Sure. So what? So it's okay that you're here, for now. He went back to his book. Tessa stared at the top of his dark head. The cowlick. The same cowlick as his father's. And she put her coffee mug down very carefully on the counter, because her hand had started, again, to do that thing she didn't want it to do. What? Adrian came back at 10 after 1. She heard the car on the gravel. She was in the library because that was where she had started going when she didn't know what else to do with herself. The library, with Deborah Langley's copy of The Thorn Birds in her lap, on page 84, making very slow progress because her eyes kept drifting off the page. She heard the car and the front door and voices in the front hall, and then his footsteps, and she stood up without meaning to. And she realized she had stood up without meaning to and tried to sit back down, and couldn't quite, and compromised by standing by the fireplace with her hand on the mantel, trying to look like she had been there on purpose. He came in. He looked tired. That was the first thing. Not tired the way he'd looked in the kitchen that first morning, which had been the tired of a man who hadn't slept. This was the other kind. The tired of a man who had spent 3 hours doing something he hadn't wanted to do and was going to have to do again. Hi, she said. Hi. You're back. I said I would be. I know. I'm saying it. You're back. He almost smiled. He crossed to the decanter, and this time he poured himself the amber drink, and this time, she noticed, he drank it. One small swallow. He set the glass back down. How did it go? It went. Adrian. It went fine. He's going to write a piece. He's going to call you a companion and not use your name. He's going to use a photograph of you from 3 years ago. from the diner's own social media account, the one where you're behind the counter pouring coffee and your hair's in a braid. It's a good photograph. You'll hate it. It will run in Sunday's paper. By Monday afternoon, nobody will care. That's the deal. What did you give him for that? Adrian looked at her. You don't want to know. Try me.
I gave him a story about somebody else, somebody who deserved the attention more than you do. Somebody I would have preferred not to sell out, but who is going to walk away from it with less damage than they would have taken from a different kind of day. It's a trade. It's not a clean one. I made it. I'd make it again. Is that man going to be okay?
He'll lose something. He won't lose everything. I warned him on the way out through a third party. He has until Saturday to prepare. That's more than I had to give him, honestly. She sat down on the arm of the chair. She put her hand flat over her stomach because she felt vaguely sick. Adrian. Yes. I don't want somebody else to get hurt to keep me from being in a newspaper. I know. Then don't do it. Tessa, I mean it. Don't trade one for the other. Put me in the paper. I'll live with it. I'll live with being in the paper. You don't understand what being in the paper is going to be. Then explain it. It's going to be a photograph of you next to the words Adrian Voss's new woman. It's going to be a paragraph about your apartment. It's going to be a paragraph about your mother. It's going to be a sentence, buried, about your medical history. They have it. They always have it. And a reader who knows what that sentence means is going to know by Monday morning that you can't have children. It is going to be the worst morning of your life. It's also going to be, specifically, the worst morning for a woman in your position, in my house, with my children, because every person with a grudge against me will call that number in the newspaper, and some of them will get through to you, and what they will say is something I don't want you to ever hear. That's what being in the paper is. I made the trade because I didn't want to do that to you. The man I sold has done worse things than being indiscreet with a reporter, and the day he was going to come up was coming anyway. I made it come 5 months sooner. That's the size of what I did. She closed her eyes. I didn't want that on your conscience for me. It isn't on my conscience. It's on his. I just chose the day. That's a lawyer's answer. Yes, it is. She sat there with her eyes closed for a long moment. Adrian? Yes. Why are you doing this? Which part? Any of it. All of it. I've been here 4 days. 4 days. I don't even know what this is. Why am I worth this? He didn't answer right away. He walked to the window. He stood there with his back to her and his hands in his pockets, and he looked out at the bare trees and he said, because the night Rebecca died, my wife, I made a deal with myself in the hallway of the emergency room about how I was going to be after, about what I was going to allow to matter. And I kept that deal for 4 years. And on Monday night, a woman I had eaten breakfast across from twice in a diner in Hell's Kitchen looked up at me from the pavement of an alley, and whatever I'd promised myself in that hallway 4 years ago, he stopped. The deal broke. That's all. I'm not saying it was supposed to break, or that it was right for it to break, or that you were the reason. You weren't the reason. The deal was going to break. You were the woman in the alley. But it broke, and I'm not going to pretend to you that it didn't. And I'm not going to let you walk back out into a city that is going to eat you alive because I couldn't be honest with myself about the fact that it broke. He turned from the window. I'm not asking you to love me, Tessa. I'm not asking you to want what I want. I don't even know what I want, completely. I'm asking you to stay in this house long enough to be safe, and long enough for both of us to figure out what the next word is. That's the whole of what I'm asking. I'm sorry if it's a bigger thing than you signed up for. I didn't sign up for it either. I'm in it anyway. She looked at him. She looked at the fire. She looked at her own hands. Okay, she said. Okay, what? Okay, I heard you. Okay, I'm not running out of here today. Okay, I heard you, Adrian. All right. I want to meet your friend. Your friend from the paper. The one you're going to, the man you sold. He's not a friend. Tessa, whoever he is, if somebody's going to lose something on Sunday because of me, I want to know his name. I want to know what he loses. I don't want him to be a concept. I want him to be a person. That's not how It is how, if I'm asking. It is how, if I say it is how. He looked at her for a long second. All right. All right. His name is Louis Arquette. He's 63. He owns 2 restaurants, one of which is legitimate. The other one is a problem. On Sunday morning, the newspaper is going to run something about the second one. He'll close it. His family will be embarrassed. His daughter, who I understand is in law school in Boston, will have a difficult month. He will probably survive. That's what I traded. That's what you paid for. What did he do to deserve it? He moved something 4 years ago for a man I don't do business with that he knew he wasn't supposed to move. He was warned. He did it anyway. I could have come for him 2 years ago and chose not to. I came for him today. That's what I did. You asked. Okay. Okay. She stood up. I'm going to go upstairs for a little while. All right. I need a minute. Take as long as you need. At the door she stopped and she turned and she said, without looking at him, Adrian, I'm sorry about your wife. Thank you. I wasn't going to say that because it felt like the wrong thing to say, but I am. I'm sorry. That's all. I know. She went upstairs. She lay down on the bed in the east guest room without taking her shoes off, and she put her arm across her eyes, and for the first time in 4 days she cried a little. Quiet, dry, the way she'd learned to cry in the group home in Yonkers. And she didn't know exactly which part she was crying about. She thought maybe she was crying about Louis Arquette. She thought maybe she was crying about the photograph of herself from 3 years ago that was going to be in a newspaper on Sunday. She thought maybe she was crying about a 9-year-old boy with a cowlick who thought his father was quieter than he used to be, and about a 6-year-old girl who had taken her hand on a path because she hadn't yet been told she couldn't. She thought mostly she was crying because the deal Adrian had made with himself in a hospital hallway 4 years ago had broken on a Monday night in an alley, and she had been the woman on the pavement. And because she had also somewhere made a deal with herself, a quieter one, a smaller one, at 19, on the table of a gynecologist's office in the Bronx. And that one was breaking too. In this house, with these children. In a library where a man told her her flaw didn't change anything, and then, 3 days later, kept proving it. She stayed upstairs for an hour. When she came back down, Mia was in the hallway. Mia was holding her stuffed rabbit by its ear, which was how she held it when she had something to say and wasn't sure how to say it. She looked up at Tessa with her enormous brown eyes, and she said, "Dad said you were sad." "I was. A little." "Are you sad now?" "A little less." "Okay." Mia held out the rabbit. "You can have Binky for a while." "Oh, sweetheart, no, he's good for when you're sad. You can have him. I'll get him back later. It's okay." Tessa took the rabbit. She took the rabbit from a 6-year-old's hand in a hallway in a house she had lived in for 4 days, and she stood there for a long moment with it in both hands, and she said, in a voice she only barely controlled, "Thank you, Mia." "You're welcome." Mia padded away down the hall. Tessa stood there holding the rabbit, and she looked down at it. It was grayish. It had one ear shorter than the other from a washing incident. It had a small patch on its stomach where something had been sewn back on. And she thought very clearly the way you think things when they are finally true. I am not going back to Hell's Kitchen. I am not going back. She didn't know what came next. She didn't know what the next word was. But she knew, standing there with that small soft thing in her hands, that whatever the word was, it was going to be said in this house. She was still standing there when Adrian came up the stairs. He stopped when he saw her. He looked at the rabbit. He didn't smile. He did something around his eyes that wasn't quite a smile, that was maybe the start of one, that was maybe the closest a man like him came to one in daylight. And he said very quietly, "She loves that rabbit." "I know. She only gives it to people she's decided on." "I figured." "Tessa." "Yeah. Come down when you're ready. There's something I want to tell you. It isn't bad." "Okay?" He went back down the stairs. She stood in the hallway with Binky the rabbit in both hands, and she breathed in and she breathed out. And she realized her shoulders weren't up around her ears again, and this time she didn't try to figure out why. She went to put the rabbit on her pillow, carefully, on its back. the way Mia would want. Then she went downstairs to find out what he had to tell her. He was waiting in the library. He wasn't sitting. He was standing by the fire with his back half turned to the door, and when she came in, he didn't do the thing he'd done the other times. The small lift of the chin, the small readjustment. He just looked at her. He looked at her the way a man looks at a woman when he has decided, finally, that he is not going to pretend he isn't looking. "Sit down," he said. "Is it bad?" "I told you upstairs it wasn't bad. You've also told me a lot of things aren't bad that turned out to be bad. That's fair?" She sat. The chair by the fire, her chair now. 4 days was apparently enough for a chair to become yours in a house like this. He stayed standing. He put his hands in his pockets. He did the breath before speaking, the one she'd started to recognize. The small preparation of a man who did not speak easily about anything he actually meant. "There's a woman named Anna Hale," he said, "in a town called Fall River, Massachusetts." Tessa went still. "What?" "She was the oldest daughter of your mother's sister, your cousin. She's 61. She works at a community college, administrative. She has 2 grown sons in Providence. She doesn't—" He stopped. He was looking at her very carefully. "She didn't know you existed until Tuesday." "What?" "Tessa, what are you talking about? What?" "I had somebody look. 2 days ago. After you told me about your mother. I didn't tell you I was going to, and I should have, and I apologize for that. I would like to tell you what they found, if you'll let me." She couldn't speak for a moment. She had not cried in front of him. Not properly. And she didn't now, but something in her face must have moved, because he crossed the room in 3 steps, and he sat down. Not in the other chair, on the low table in front of her, knees almost touching hers, which was the closest he had ever put himself to her deliberately. And he said low, "I can stop. Say the word." "No, keep going. Your mother had a sister. You knew that." I knew she had family, somewhere. She wouldn't talk about it. She said they'd all decided she wasn't worth—" She stopped. She couldn't get past wasn't worth. "Keep going." "Her sister died in 2007. She didn't know you existed either. Your mother cut them all off when she was 20, before you were born. I don't know why. Nobody living knows why. What I know is that your mother had a sister, and that sister had 3 children, and 2 of them are dead now, and the 3rd is a woman named Anna Hale in Fall River. And she is a perfectly ordinary 61-year-old woman who answered the phone on Tuesday and cried on it for 20 minutes when the man I sent told her her cousin Linda's daughter was alive." Tessa put her hand over her mouth. You didn't have to. I know. I never asked you to. I know, Tessa. Why did you? Because you told me the first night you were here that there wasn't anybody. And I made a note of it, because I make notes of things. And when I had a quiet morning, I asked someone to make sure. That's all. I didn't do it to surprise you or to give you anything. I did it because I wanted to know whether the sentence you said was true, and if it wasn't, I wanted to tell you. She knew my mother. She was the flower girl at your mother's first wedding. She has a photograph somewhere of your mother at 18. She said on the phone, she said, "Is she alive? Is Tessa alive?" Because your mother had sent a letter in 1998, 1 letter, with your name in it, and then nothing for the rest of her life. Tessa had known about the letter. Her mother had mentioned it once on a bad night. I wrote them once. I wrote them when I had you, and they didn't write me back, and that was it for me. Tessa had been 12. Her mother had cried. Tessa had not known then that there was another possibility, that the letter had gotten lost, that a sister had written back and the answer had never come, that an aunt in Fall River had waited by her mailbox for a response and grieved, in her own quiet way, what she'd thought was her sister's refusal to let her back in. She wrote back, Tessa said. She wrote back 3 times. They came back marked not at this address. Your mother had moved. She didn't leave a forwarding. The letters sat in a box in a house in Fall River for 27 years. Anna kept them. She showed the man I sent. Tessa's face was wet. She didn't remember starting. Adrian? Yes. Why are you telling me this today? Because you told me yesterday that you couldn't be standing in front of a door you weren't allowed to open. And I thought maybe
Maybe you'd been told for a very long time that there wasn't a door. And I wanted to tell you there was. That's all. I'm not trying to give you a family. That's not mine to give. I'm telling you there's a woman in Fall River who has been grieving you since 1998 and doesn't have to grieve you anymore if you want to pick up a phone. I don't know if I can do that today. You don't have to do it today. You don't ever have to do it. I just didn't want you to not know. She's my first cousin once removed, technically, but she called herself your cousin and she cried on the phone, so I'd say cousin. Tessa laughed. It came out wrong, sob-shaped with no air in it, and she pressed her hands over her face and she said, Jesus, Adrian. I'm sorry, I should have asked first, I know. No. I should. No, thank you. I don't know what to. Thank you. He didn't say you're welcome. He didn't say anything. He reached forward very slowly. So slowly she could have pulled back and it would have been nothing. And he touched the back of her wrist with 2 fingers. Just that. No more. And she turned her hand over and he didn't take it, didn't hold it, just let his fingers rest against her palm for maybe 4 seconds, and she felt it like a wire had been run through her chest. He took his hand back. He stood up. I'll give you the number when you're ready. There's no pressure on when. Okay. I'm going to go find my daughter because she was hiding in the dining room when I came in here and I'd like to know why. Okay. He went to the door. At the door he stopped. He didn't turn. Tessa. Yeah, I am not a good man. I want you to know that I know that. I am telling you because you are going to find out anyway, in pieces, over the next however long, and I would rather you hear the headline from me. I have done things I am not proud of, and I will do more of them. But I do not lie to the people I let into my house, and I do not hurt the people who sleep under my roof. And what I give you because I want to, not because I expect anything in return. That's the only thing I can say cleanly about myself. I wanted you to hear it. He left. She sat in the chair for a very long time. The fire had burned down. Mrs. Carver came in, quietly, at some point, and built it back up without a word, and left again. Tessa didn't move. She watched the flames, and she thought about a woman in Fall River named Anna Hale, who had waited 27 years for a phone call, and she thought about her mother, dead in 2019 in a hospice in the Bronx, who had died thinking her family had stopped loving her, when in fact her family had simply lost her in the mail. She thought, I have always believed I was alone because I was told I was. She thought, everything I have believed about what I'm worth. I was told by somebody, at some point, who was wrong. She sat with it for a long time. She did not call Anna Hale that afternoon. She called her the next morning, at 8:30. From the kitchen phone, with Mrs. Carver sitting at the island pretending to read a magazine, because Tessa had asked her to stay close and she had stayed close. The conversation lasted 41 minutes. Tessa did most of the listening. At the end of it, she said, in a voice that was steadier than she'd expected, that she would come up in a little while, when things were quieter. That she'd like to come up. That she'd like to see the photograph of her mother. Anna Hale cried again. Tessa cried a little too. Not much. Just enough. When she hung up, Mrs. Carver didn't look up from the magazine. She just said, That was a good thing, Miss Tessa. Yeah. I'll have tea sent up if you'd like. Yeah, please. Thank you. She went upstairs. She sat on the bed. She picked up Binky the rabbit off the pillow. Mia had left him there on purpose, the day before, as an ongoing loan. And she held him in her lap. And she thought about how strange it was that the worst thing in her life, the quiet, unloved fact of being nobody's, had in 4 days stopped being true. And she hadn't been the one to change it. That was the thing she would think about for a long time after. That sometimes the thing you couldn't do for yourself was something somebody else had to do for you first, and that you had to be willing to let them. The newspaper piece ran on Sunday. It was bad. Not as bad as it could have been. The photograph was the 3-year-old one, the one Adrian had predicted, Tessa in a braid pouring coffee, and the caption under it said, a companion of Mr. Voss, identified only as T.H. The piece called her a waitress of modest background, with no known ties to the business community or to any of the families understood to be active in the city's less formal economy. It didn't use her name. It didn't mention the medical thing. It didn't print her address. It was a long, careful professional piece about Adrian Voss,
And she was a paragraph in the middle of it, and the paragraph was more or less dignified. The piece that ran on the next page was about Louis Arquette and his second restaurant. Tessa read both pieces twice. She folded the paper. She put it on the kitchen counter and she said to Adrian, who was watching her, "It's not as bad as you said." "I know. I made sure." "How?" "I gave him the story on Louis because I wanted to shape yours." "Oh. I told you. It was a trade." "Yeah." She didn't say thank you. He didn't ask her to. They drank their coffee. On Monday, Louis Arquette's daughter in Boston called her law school and told them she would be taking a leave of absence for the spring term. On Tuesday, Louis Arquette sold his second restaurant for less than it was worth to a buyer who had been waiting. On Wednesday, federal agents, the not kind that apparently did come to people who weren't Adrian Voss, searched Louis Arquette's house and took 3 boxes. Nobody was arrested. That wasn't the point. Tessa learned about each of these things from Adrian, who told her over dinner in exact sentences without editorializing because she had asked him to. On Thursday night, after Mia had gone to bed, she said across the kitchen island, "Are you going to sleep tonight?" "Probably not much." "Because of Arquette?" "Because of a lot of things." "Adrian?" "Yes." "Was it worth it?" He looked at her. "Yes." "Even if—" "Tessa, you have asked me that question 3 different ways this week. The answer is yes. I want you to stop asking, not because the question isn't fair, because I can tell that every time I answer it, you write something down in your head about me, and I want you to know that I've already written those things down about myself. You're not going to surprise me. You're not going to make me feel a thing I haven't already felt. I did it. I'm the kind of man who did it. Eat your soup." "Okay?" "Okay." She ate her soup. The trouble came on a Saturday. It came in a way Adrian had apparently been watching for because he moved before she understood what was happening. She was in the garden with Danny. It was the first warm day. Not warm exactly, but not cold. A day where you could stand outside in a sweater and believe in spring. And Danny was trying to show her where the peas were going to go when Mr. Keller crossed the lawn fast, not running, but close, and said 2 words to her that she didn't quite catch, and she felt herself being turned, firmly, back toward the house. "What?" "Inside, Miss Hale. Now, please." "Danny, Mr. Voss has him. Come on." She went. Danny was already being carried, actually carried, flung over Adrian's shoulder, which Danny was too old for and which Adrian hadn't stopped to negotiate, and Mia was being rushed from a different direction by Mrs. Carver. The 4 of them converged on the side door at the same moment. The door slammed. Somebody threw a bolt she hadn't known was there. "What happened?" Tessa said. "What?" "Car at the gate," Adrian said. "Not on the list. Not one of mine." "Whose?" "I don't know yet." He set Danny down. Danny was not crying. Danny's face was white and adult, and Tessa looked at it and thought, this has happened before for this kid, and her heart cracked a little. "Dad?" "I know, buddy." "Dad, it's—" "I know. Take your sister to the safe room, now. Go." "Dad?" "Now, Daniel." Danny took his sister's hand. He pulled her fast toward the stairs. Mia was already crying, small and quiet, the crying of a child who knew not to be loud about it, which was the worst crying Tessa had ever heard. They disappeared upstairs. Mrs. Carver followed them. She had her hand inside her blouse this time, openly, and Tessa saw what it was, small, black, a woman's gun. And she didn't have the room in her head to react to it. "Adrian, Tessa, sit there, against that wall, not near the window." "Are you?" "Sit there." She sat. He was on a phone, not the landline. A cell phone she hadn't seen before. He was speaking in short, clipped phrases to somebody on the other end, and his face was doing nothing at all, which was, she had learned, how his face reacted to actual danger. 3 of them. Yes. Black sedan, tinted. At least 2 long guns. No. Take them now. I don't care. I said now. He hung up. He looked at her. "It's going to be fine," he said. "I need you to stay where you are." "Who?" "A man named Victor Okonkwo
has been trying to decide for 3 weeks whether he wants a war with me. He has decided he does. He has decided badly. It will be over in 10 minutes. Adrian, 10 minutes. Sit there. Do not get up. She sat.
The next 10 minutes were the longest of her life. She could hear things. She couldn't identify what they were. Once, very distantly, something that might have been a shot. Once, a car engine fast going. Once, a man shouting something in a language she didn't speak. She sat with her back to a wall in the side hallway of Adrian Voss's house, and she pressed her hands against the cool wood of the floor, and she thought about Mia's face when Danny had pulled her up the stairs, and she thought about Danny's white adult face, and she thought, with a clarity that surprised her, I will burn this world down before I let that girl cry like that again. She had not known she was the kind of woman who thought things like that. She was, apparently. At the end of the 10 minutes, Adrian came back down the hall. He didn't have a mark on him. He was on the phone again. He was saying, no, leave him. I want to talk to him myself. And no, the other two. And then he hung up and he crouched in front of her against the wall and he said, it's over. Are you all right? I'm fine. The kids are fine. Mrs. Carver has them. They're in the basement. They know the drill. It's not the first time. I'm not going to pretend it is. Oh, I'm going to go to them. I want you to come with me. Okay. Tessa? Yeah? I'm going to tell them you're coming. I'm going to tell them you're with me. Is that all right with you? She looked at him. Adrian, I know what I'm asking. Yes, she said. Yes, that's all right with me. He stood up. He held out a hand. She took it. It was the first time she'd held his hand. It felt, for some reason, like the smallest thing that had happened all morning, and also the largest. The basement room wasn't a basement. It was a room off the wine cellar, with a reinforced door and a couch and a small television set to a kids' show with the sound off, and beanbags, and a shelf of board games and a box of markers, because whoever had set it up had understood that what children needed in a place like that wasn't steal, it was familiarity. Mia was on the couch in Mrs. Carver's lap. Danny was sitting on the floor with his back against the couch, arms around his knees. Dad, hi buddy, it's over. It's over. It's over. Come here. Danny stood up. He walked to his father. He did not run. He did not cry. He walked, and Adrian went down on one knee, and Danny put his arms around his father's neck and held on very tight, and Adrian held him back and said nothing at all for a full 30 seconds. Then Mia saw Tessa. Tessa. Hi, honey. You came. I came. Are you okay? I'm okay. Are you? A little scared. Yeah, me too. Come here. Tessa didn't know, even while she was doing it, that she was the kind of woman who could sit down on a beanbag in a panic room and open her arms to a child she'd met 8 days ago. She sat. She opened her arms. Mia slid out of Mrs. Carver's lap, and she came to Tessa, and she sat in Tessa's lap, and she put her small face against Tessa's shoulder, and she said into Tessa's sweater, Binky helped. I bet. I gave him to you for this. I know you did, sweetheart. Is Dad mad? No, Dad's not mad. He looks mad. That's a different kind of mad. He's not mad at you. Okay. Tessa held her. She looked over Mia's head at Adrian. He was still holding Danny. He was looking at her. He was looking at the two of them, Tessa and Mia on the beanbag, Mia's face in Tessa's sweater. And his face was doing a thing Tessa had not seen on it before and would not see on it again for a long time. It was not calm. It was not the performance of calm. It was the face of a man who had just understood, in a basement in a house he'd lived in alone for 4 years, that he wasn't alone in it anymore. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. They didn't talk about it that night. They talked about it the next morning. They talked about it over coffee in the kitchen, with the kids upstairs, with Mrs. Carver pretending to do something at the sink and not pretending very hard. Adrian told her what was going to happen to Victor Okonkwo. He told her what he wished he could say wasn't going to happen. He told her, in his flat professional voice, that the man who had been in the car at the gate was in a hospital in White Plains and would live and would not try this again, because his brother had not lived, and the difference would be explained to him when he was well enough to understand it. Tessa listened. She did not say, "You can't just kill a man's brother."
She did not say that because she had spent the previous night lying in bed holding a stuffed rabbit, listening through the wall to a 6-year-old whimper in her sleep. And she had understood, finally, permanently, that the world she had walked into on a Monday night in Hell's Kitchen was a world that ran on ugly math, and that the alternative to the math was not peace. The alternative was a whimper through a wall forever. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Adrian." "Yes. I don't want to become a person who thinks this is normal. I want to say that out loud. To you. Right now. So you hear me say it. I don't want to look back in 2 years and realize I stopped flinching. No. I don't want. She stopped. "I don't want Mia to see me not flinch. I don't want her to think the woman in her house is the kind of woman who stopped caring. I need you to help me not become that. Can you do that?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Yes," he said. "I can try. I've never been asked that before. Rebecca didn't ask me that. She made a different peace with it, a quieter one. I think it cost her more than she told me. I'm not Rebecca." "No, you're not. I'm asking." "I heard you. Yes, I'll help you." "Thank you." "You're welcome." There was a silence. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that settled over two people who had just agreed on something difficult and were letting the agreement sit so it didn't rub against anything. "Tessa?" "Yeah. There's a thing I want to ask you. I've wanted to ask you for a few days. I'm asking now because I don't want to ask you later and have you wonder whether it was because of yesterday." "Okay?" He set his coffee down. "Stay. Not the word stay the way we've been using it, where we leave it open. The other word. Stay. Here. In this house, not because it isn't safe outside, because it is this one. I'm not asking you to marry me. I'm not asking you to promise me anything. I'm asking you to live here. I'm asking you to stop calling this the East Guest Room and start calling it yours. I'm asking you to meet Danny's teacher at his parents' night in May, if you want to, because he wants you to. He told me. I'm asking you to let me pay for you to finish the degree. I found out this week you started and never finished, not because I think it's my job to fix you, because I think you're going to be better at being done with it than anybody I know. And I'm asking you to let my daughter keep putting her face in your sweater when she's scared, because she's going to be scared again. And you are apparently the shape she fits into. I'm asking for all of that. I'm not asking for anything else. I'm not in the business of asking for anything else yet. I know what I am, and I know what I'm not, and I know I have not earned anything else. That's the ask." She looked at him. She looked at her coffee. She looked at the window, the garden coming back, the small green of something pushing up through last year's dirt. "That's a big ask," she said. "I know. I started a degree in social work. I know. I was 12 credits short. I know. You got my transcripts? I had somebody look. Jesus, Adrian. I won't do it again. I wanted to know." She laughed. It came out soft. "You always want to know." "Yes." "Okay. Okay? Okay, I'll stay. In the way you said. I'll stay." He didn't move for a long moment. "Thank you," he said. Don't thank me. It's not a favor. I know what it is. I'm still thanking you. Okay? Okay." He reached across the island. This time he took her hand. He took it properly, not 2 fingers on her wrist, but her whole hand, in his, palm to palm. And she looked down at where their hands met on the stone counter and she thought, stupidly, my knuckles are redder than his. I should moisturize. And then she thought, he has a small scar across the base of his thumb I've never noticed before. And then she thought, I'm going to be looking at this hand for the rest of my life, probably. And she didn't pull hers back. "There is one other thing," he said. "What?" "I'd like my children to have your last name as an option, not instead of theirs. In addition to, if you'll let me have the legal paperwork drawn up, it would just be a line, a document. It would mean if anything happened to me, they couldn't be taken from the house because you weren't blood. I'm asking you this because of yesterday. I'm asking you this because the safe room is not a hypothetical. It is a Saturday thing sometimes.
And I will not leave my daughter in a situation where she loses me and then loses you too, because some judge somewhere thinks an unmarried woman in a house isn't anyone. That's the ask. You can say no. Nothing changes if you say no. I will still have fought the judge. I would just rather not have to. Their last name is an option. Danny Voss Hale, Mia Voss Hale. Only if you want. Only if they want when they're older. Not replacing me. Adding you. I'm asking because I'm asking. She didn't answer for a long time. She thought about her mother's ring in the little box upstairs. She thought about Anna Hale in Fall River, who had cried on a phone for 20 minutes. She thought about Mia's face in her sweater. She thought about the 19-year-old in a gynecologist's office in the Bronx, who had been told she would never be a mother, and who had accepted the sentence as if it had come from somewhere binding, as if it had been the last word on the subject. She thought about how wrong that 19-year-old had been. Not about the medicine. The medicine was right. But about the sentence. About what the sentence meant. Because there had been a door in the wall the whole time, and she hadn't been able to see it because nobody had told her it was there. A door in the wall. A woman named Anna in Fall River. A stuffed rabbit named Binky on a pillow. A 9-year-old with a cowlick who said his father was quieter than he used to be, and a 6-year-old who fit the shape of her shoulder. She squeezed his hand. Yes, she said. Yes, do the paperwork. He didn't smile. He did the thing around his eyes he did instead of smiling. All right, he said. Adrian? Yes, I'm still me. I'm still the woman you pulled out of an alley. I'm not going to become somebody else to fit this house. I'm going to be bad at some of it. I'm going to be bad at the part where I have to learn to be quiet when something bad has happened and the kids are in the next room. I'm going to be bad at whatever you and your Mrs. Carver do with the face. You're both going to have to be patient with me. I know. I've been alone a long time. I know. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. We're going to be bad at it. Yes. Good, she said. I wanted to say that out loud. I wanted us to agree that we were going to be bad at it, so that when we are, we don't think something's broken. Agreed. Okay. Okay. Now let go of my hand. Mrs. Carver has been pretending to wash the same pan for 8 minutes. She'll be fine. Adrian. 2 more seconds. Adrian. He let go of her hand. He was not quite smiling. He was doing the thing around his eyes. Mrs. Carver, at the sink, turned off the water without comment and walked out of the kitchen and closed the door behind her. And Tessa, for the first time in a very long time, for the first time in a way she could not remember, laughed the way a woman laughs when nothing is wrong, right then, for that specific minute. Adrian watched her laugh. He said very quietly, I haven't seen you do that. Do what? That? Laugh. Yes. I haven't either, in a while. Good. Yeah. He stood up. He came around the island. He didn't kiss her. He didn't do that yet, and she was grateful because she wasn't ready for that yet, and he had read it in her face the way he seemed to read everything. He put his hand, just his hand, on the side of her face, palm flat against her cheek, fingers light at her temple. He held it there for maybe 10 seconds. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, he had already stepped back. Go find my daughter, he said. She's been waiting for you. Okay. And tell her Binky is officially yours on loan until further notice. I'll take the heat. Okay. She went. Upstairs, Mia was on the floor of the playroom building, something out of magnetic tiles. She looked up when Tessa came in. She didn't stand up. She held out one of the tiles and said, I'm making a house. You have to help. You do the roof. Tessa sat down on the floor. She did the roof. A year later, in a conference room on the 34th floor of a building on 42nd Street, a man named Lou Penska signed a document that gave a waitress from Hell's Kitchen guardianship rights in the event of Adrian Voss's death over 2 children named Daniel and Amelia Voss. Lou had done the paperwork. Lou had not asked many questions. Lou had been paid his rate. A year and a half later, on a warm day at the end of May, Tessa Hale stood behind a lectern at a community college in Yonkers and accepted a diploma in social work. She'd finished the 12 credits in 11 months, evenings, while Mia was in bed. Danny was in the audience with Adrian. Danny was 10 now, and tall, and had gotten his cowlick slicked down for the occasion, which would last about 40 minutes. 2 years later, she picked up her phone on a Tuesday morning in March and saw that it was Anna Hale, and she answered it. And Anna Hale told her that her son, Anna's son, had just had a baby, and asked her if she wanted to come up and meet him. And Tessa said yes, and she went, with Adrian and Danny and Mia, and held a baby who was technically her second cousin, and did not cry because she had stopped crying about this kind of thing. Mostly. 3 years later, Mia Voss Hale, the hyphen, had gone on the paperwork 8 months after the basement day, the way Tessa had said yes, came home from second grade with a writing assignment in her backpack. Tell us about a person in your family. She had written, in purple pencil, in the careful square letters of a 7-year-old. My mom. Tessa is not my first mom. My first mom died before I could remember her. Tessa is my second mom. She holds my hand. She lets me keep Binky at her house. She is very brave, but sometimes she flinches. That is okay. Flinching means you still know what's bad. My dad says so. Tessa read it standing at the kitchen island. Adrian was at the stove making eggs, badly, because he insisted on cooking on Sundays despite having no talent for it. Adrian. Yes. Did you tell her that? Tell her what? That flinching means you still know what's bad. He looked over his shoulder at her. I might have. Once. You idiot? What? Come here. He came. He read it over her shoulder. He went very still. That's, yeah. I don't know what to...
Me neither. Tessa. Yeah. I'm going to ruin these eggs. The eggs are already ruined. They were going to be ruined from the beginning. I know.
He put his chin, very lightly, on top of her head. She leaned back into him. The page in her hand shook a little.
She didn't care much anymore when her hands shook. She had stopped being ashamed of her hands a long time ago. Somewhere around the morning, Anna Hale had called her for the 3rd time. Somewhere around the night, she'd signed her name on a guardianship document at a table in a conference room on a high floor. Somewhere around the afternoon, she'd walked Mia into her first day of kindergarten, and the teacher had said, "And you are." And Tessa had said, without thinking, her mom, and Mia had looked up at her with the enormous brown eyes, and had not corrected her. In the end, what she'd learned, what she would tell anyone, years later, if they asked her, which they did sometimes, gently, at the social work job she took and quit and took again, was smaller than it had any right to be. It was this, that the sentences we carry about ourselves are almost never written by us, that somebody else wrote you or alone on her when she was a child, and she had gone through her whole early life reading it out loud to herself every morning, like a prayer she couldn't stop. That somebody else had written, "You are broken" on her, when she was 19, and she had kept that one folded up in her pocket until she was 26, touching it whenever she forgot it was there. That the work of the rest of a life was not, mostly, about writing new sentences. It was about being willing, one afternoon, to hand the old ones to somebody else and let them read them back to you. And to believe them when they said, "I've read it." It doesn't change anything. That was the whole of it. She had walked into an alley one Monday night in March with $43 in her account and a hole in her sneaker, and she had walked out, eventually, with a life. Not a clean one, not a simple one, not a life that would look good in a photograph or a magazine piece, but a life. With people in it who knew her name and who used it and who came looking for her when she wasn't in the room. Adrian Voss was not a good man. She knew it. He knew it. He told her once a year, with a consistency she had come to find almost funny, that he was not a good man. She would tell him each time that she had hurt him. She would tell him each time that she had decided to love him anyway, and he would look at her the way he had looked at her in the library that first morning when she had told him the thing about her body, and he would say the words he had said then, the words that had cracked something open in her that had never quite closed back up. It doesn't change anything. And she would know every time that he meant it, and that she finally believed him. The eggs burned. Mia came downstairs holding her rabbit by one ear, and Danny came down behind her arguing about something Mia had done to his Lego, and Mrs. Carver, older now, slower, but present, still present, the fixed point of this house, came in through the side door with a bag of fresh bread from the bakery in town.
Tessa folded the piece of purple pencil writing very carefully and put it in the pocket of her cardigan. She went to help with breakfast.